Chapter 2054. I'm not Shen Manting either. Shen Manting was a little disappointed. I'm used to it. You all call me Manting, but Manting is gone. Can I still be Manting? Shen Luoan sighed softly and glanced at her sideways. He held the steering wheel with one hand and held her hand with the other. Looking at the road ahead, he said slowly, "What are you talking about? No matter who you used to be, or who the real Shen Manting is, you are you now. You are Shen Manting. I'm just here to take a look because I'm a genius. Honey, will you still be my husband in the future?" Shen Manting looked at him with a pair of big eyes full of doubt and expectation. Shen Luoan's heart fluttered when he suddenly heard this. He turned his head and looked into her dark and clear eyes. He felt a little choked. After a long time, he said softly, "As long as you want, we will always be husband and wife." Shen Manting's originally gloomy mood suddenly became joyful. With a smile on her face, she lowered her head and played with the hem of her dress. She said happily, "Of course I want to. We will always be husband and wife." Shen Luoan looked at her deeply and looked away. There was a dull pain in his chest, and his hands trembled slightly. Looking at the bright sky ahead, he said tentatively and pleadingly, "Then let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow." Huh? Shen Manting didn't hear clearly. "Honey, what did you say?" Looking at her clear and innocent eyes, Shen Luoan's courage suddenly shrank. His throat was a little dry, and he said, "Nothing." It was already afternoon when they returned to the city. Shen Manting was hungry, so he took her out for dinner. It was already 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they returned home. Because Shen Manting woke up, Shen Luoan hadn't been to the laboratory for several days. Old Fifth made one call after another. In the end, Shen Luoan couldn't win against Lao Wu. He had to leave Shen Manting at home and go out. Before going out, Shen Manting seemed to be a little flustered and called out, "Honey." Huh? Shen Luoan turned around. "What's wrong? When will you be back?" "At night." Shen Luoan rubbed her little head and said softly, "I'll try to come back as soon as possible." "Oh." Shen Manting looked a little disappointed. "Can't you bring me along? Be good and stay at home." "It'll be fine." Shen Luoan looked a little helpless. "You can spend some time with your son. You're his mother. You need to nurture your relationship with him." "All right," Shen Manting finally felt a little relieved. She tugged at his clothes reluctantly and said, "Then, come back soon." "Okay." Shen Luoan let go of her hand and turned around. But before he could take 2 steps, he heard another shout from behind, "Hubby." He turned around and saw Shen Manting running towards him with a flushed face. Shen Manting stood on her tiptoes and kissed him on the lips. "I'll wait for you to come back," she said. Shen Luoan's heart was itching. He couldn't help it. He held her head with one hand and kissed her on the lips. His nimble and powerful tongue probed into her mouth and gently pried open her pearly white teeth. It pierced in slightly, tyrannically and greedily rolling her out, holding her tightly to him. His kiss was a little forceful. Shen Manting had never experienced such a feeling before. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Chapter 2055. Shen Manting's heartbeat quickened, and she instinctively wrapped her arms around his waist. Shen Luoan couldn't help but push her against the door. Cough cough. The woman's coughing successfully pulled him back to reality. When he released her, he noticed that her face was completely red. Wiping the water from the corner of his mouth, he lowered his head slightly. Shen Luoan's Adam's apple tightened when he saw her expression. Damn it! His body, which had been empty for 3 years, began to heat up uncontrollably. He looked behind Shen Manting and immediately saw Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian looked at him suggestively and said, "Big brother, isn't it a little inconvenient to do this at the doorstep?" why don't we return to our room? Shen Manting's face turned even redder. She turned around and glared at Yi Qianqian shyly. She stomped her feet and said, "You're so mean." Her coquettish voice carried the annoyance and coquettishness of a young girl. Shen Luo'an's heart melted as he listened. Yi Qianqian was stunned and subconsciously looked at Shen Manting's back. Then, he couldn't help but sigh. It was indeed the consciousness of a little girl. Shen Luo'an couldn't help but say, "Don't tease her. She's still young." Yi Qianqian replied, "Big brother, it really isn't appropriate to do it at the door." Shen Luo'an was speechless. He turned around and said, "I'm going to work. Be careful on the road, big brother." Yi Qianqian waved at him. She closed the door and skipped toward her room. Shenjilia was taking an afternoon nap. When he sensed Yi Qianqian enter, he didn't move. He looked up and breathed steadily. Yi Qianqian took off her shoes, lifted the covers, and crawled into bed. She reached over and hugged Shenjilia's waist. She straddled his lap and called out, "Old Shen, get up." Shenjilia didn't open his eyes. He flipped over in her position and hugged her face to face. Yi Qianqian felt a little defeated and continued, "Is it fun to dream?" Shenjilia was speechless. "More fun than me?" Shenjilia opened his eyes and asked, "Do you miss me?" Yi Qianqian's lips curled up, but before she could finish, Shenjilia pounced on her like a wolf. "Ah!" Yi Qianqian screamed with laughter and shouted, "Wait! I have something to say." Shenjilia pinned her under his body and held her firmly between his legs as he said, "I'm going to play with you now." "Wait a minute, I'm just kidding," Yi Qianqian exclaimed. Shenjilia kissed her on the mouth and murmured, "It's too late." "Oh." Yi Qianqian's words were completely swallowed by him. When she was feeling dizzy from the kiss, she pushed his face away and said, "Guess what I just saw?" "What?" Shenjilia was tugging at her clothes, trying his best to pull them off and throw them away. However, after a few tugs, Yi Qianqian refused to cooperate. She frowned and shouted, "Get up for a second." Yi Qianqian arched her back, and Shenjilia finally managed to pull the sweater off. "I saw Big Brother kissing Manting." Yi Qianqian wrapped her arms around his neck. "But Manting is obviously still a child. Doesn't Big Brother feel like he's molesting a child?" Shenjilia's originally serious face couldn't help but burst out laughing. He lifted the blanket up and hugged her exposed head. He pressed his lips against her neck and whispered, "What are you thinking about? Sister Manting is 2 years older than me." "Oh, you didn't see it? She just..." "Oh." Yi Qianqian's words were cut off. Chapter 2056. At first, Yi Qianqian still had the strength to deal with his fierce attacks, but then she completely fell under his passion. Slow down, Shenjilia worked very hard and didn't stop for a moment. When it was almost over, he whispered into her ear, "I want a child." Yi Qianqian narrowed her eyes and hugged him. Her eyes were wet and she whispered, "This is not a reason for you to indulge. Hurry. Get." Shenjilia laughed out loud and kissed her more passionately. Shen Manting originally wanted to ask Yi Qianqian something, but when she walked to the door, she heard faint sounds coming from inside. He didn't deliberately try to cover it up. Even though his voice was pitifully soft through the door, Shen Manting could still hear him clearly as she stood close to the door. For some reason, her hand that was about to knock on the door suddenly stopped. His cheeks began to heat up slightly, and images that made him blush immediately popped up in his mind like a conditioned reflex. She obviously hadn't seen it, but she knew it clearly. Shen Manting withdrew her hand and turned to return to her room. She picked up her phone and after studying it for a while, she finally opened the browser. She saw 2 words, search. She clicked on it, and a keyboard page automatically popped up. She touched it with her finger and poked a few times. She typed, "How to make your husband happy." She clicked on it, and the first line was, 10 little things to make your husband happy. After reading back and forth for a long time, Shen Manting blushed and closed the page. Shen Luo and came back very late that night. It was almost 11 p.m. When he opened the door, the room was dark. There was no doubt that the child had fallen asleep. However, when he walked in and was about to turn on the lights in the room suddenly lit up. Shen Luo and was startled. When he came back to his senses, he saw Shen Manting in her pajamas standing next to the switch. "Husband, you're back." Shen Manting went up to him. "Let me help you take off your coat." Shen Luo and was a little flattered and looked at her. Shen Manting had already reached out to touch his coat and smoothly took off his clothes. Then, she hung up the coat and said, "Sit down for a while. I'll help you run the bath." Shen Luo and looked at her strangely and asked, "What's wrong?" When Shen Manting heard this, her cheeks became a little hot and she said, "I just want to help you run the bath." Then, he walked in. The sound of running water came from the bathroom, and Shen Luo and's heart warmed slightly. Shen Manting walked in and sat beside the bathtub. She stared blankly at the clear hot water flowing down. When he heard the footsteps, he immediately stood up. Shen Luo and stared at her and walked in leisurely. "What's wrong with you today?" When Shen Manting heard his question, she lowered her head in embarrassment and said, "Nothing, I just want to be a good wife." She looked up at him with her clear eyes and said, "Hubby, from today onwards, I'm going to run the bathtub for you every day. I don't know how to make breakfast at work, but I can help you with your tie." As he spoke, the light in his eyes became even more mesmerizing. Shen Luo and stared at the cute little woman in front of him. His heart couldn't help but flutter. "I still have to learn how to make love lunchboxes." "Ah." Shen Manting swallowed her words. She was startled by his sudden embrace. "What? What's wrong?" Shen Luo and hugged her tightly. Shen Manting didn't know if it was an illusion, but she actually felt that. He was afraid, but wasn't he a man? What would a man be afraid of? Chapter 2057. Shen Luo and hugged her tightly. Shen Manting didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that. He was afraid, but wasn't he a man? What would a man be afraid of? Shen Manting didn't understand. She hugged the man and whispered, "Honey." The room was silent. There was only the sound of the bathtub running water in the bathroom. Shen Luo and hugged her and whispered, "Manting, I love you." His voice was very low, and there was an almost inaudible quiver in it. Shen Manting was slightly stunned when she heard this. She should be happy. But she didn't know why she felt a little sad. She felt that Shen Luo and was hugging her tighter. She groaned and whispered, "Honey, you're too tight. I'm uncomfortable." Shen Luo and released her slightly when he heard this. Shen Manting noticed that Shen Luo and's eyes were a little red. Her heart ached and she felt a little sad. Shen Manting pouted and looked at Shen Luo and, "Honey, what's wrong with you today?" "It's nothing." Shen Luo and combed her hair behind her ear and whispered, "I'm very happy." Shen Manting saw the slight smile on his lips and felt a little better. "Well, as long as you're happy. I'll do this for you every day in the future." Shen Manting smiled and put her hands on his shoulders. She stood on tiptoe and kissed him. "I love you too." After saying this, she felt a little sweet in her heart. With a smile on his lips, he quickly ran out. She held the door handle and looked at him deeply when she was about to close it. After a moment, she turned around and her heart was beating fast. "I'm in love," Shen Manting said to herself. Her face was hot and her mood was high. Shen Luo and stood in the bathroom for a long time before he turned to look at the bathtub. The water was running fast and it was almost full. "I just want to be a good wife." Her simple and shy words made Shen Luo'an's heart beat faster. How nice. When he came out of the shower, Shen Manting was already asleep. He gently lifted the quilt and got into bed. Shen Luo'an gently wrapped his arm around her waist. Shen Manting sensed his arrival and snuggled into his arms. She breathed heavily in his arms, relying on him and greedily. Shen Luo'an smiled and quickly closed his eyes. The baby woke up early the next morning. A childish voice called out in a childish voice, "Daddy." Shen Luo'an woke up immediately. Shen Yueshao was standing on the child's bed, leaning against the railing and looking at him pitifully. Shen Luo'an subconsciously glanced at Shen Manting. She was still asleep, but he didn't know what she was dreaming about. There was a faint smile on her lips. Shen Luo'an stood up quietly, picked up his son, and walked inside. After her son was done peeing, she helped the little boy brush his teeth, wash his face, and change his clothes. Shen Manting slowly woke up after everything was done. When he stood up, he was shocked to find that the father and son were already neatly dressed. Looking at the time, it was already 7:30. She quickly got up and said, "Hubby, I woke up late. Why didn't you wake me up?" "Nothing much. Go back to sleep if you're tired." Shen Luo'an walked over with the baby in his arms. "Call me mommy." "Mommy." The little boy reached out to Shen Manting. "Give me a hug." Shen Manting hugged him and said regretfully, "I wanted to help you shave and tie your tie, but I can't do that today." Shen Luo'an's gaze softened. He held her chin and kissed her on the lips. Chapter 2058. Shen Manting's cheeks were pink, and she shrank back. When Shen Luo'an saw her like this, he couldn't help but lean forward and say, "I don't mind." Shen Manting's face turned even redder. I mind." Then she glanced at Shen Luo'an and the child and said, "I'm going to brush my teeth." After getting out of bed, Shen Manting hurried into the bathroom. She touched her face. It was burning hot. My husband is so dirty. I didn't even brush my teeth, and he kissed me just like that." Shen Manting looked at herself in the mirror and took a whiff of her breath. "It seems okay." After washing up, Shen Manting walked out and saw Shenjilia playing with a tablet with the little boy in his arms. "Do you know what this is?" Shenjilia whispered and pointed to a watermelon. "Tell me." Shen Yueshao looked at it for a long time, then pointed to it and said, "Eat." Shenjilia smiled and rubbed his head, saying, "You know it's eat. You're smart. What about this?" "Mom." Xiao Yu called out. He was very excited to see Shen Manting. He struggled to get down from Shenjilia's lap and shouted, "Mommy." Shenjilia put him down and sighed, "This little boy doesn't want me now that he has a mother. Little ingrate." Little Moon ran over and hugged Shen Manting with a smile. He jumped up and down and shouted, "Mommy." Shen Manting picked up the little boy and was in a good mood. She looked at Shenjilia and asked, "Where's my husband?" "Well." Shenjilia was still very unfamiliar with the way Shen Manting addressed him. He lowered his head and touched his nose, saying, "He just went out. He should be in the garden." "Okay, thank you." Shen Manting walked out with Little Moon in her arms, looking very motherly. Shenjilia looked at her back and said with a sigh, "You've really changed. Right, I wasn't wrong, right?" When Yi Qianqian came out, she heard Shenjilia's voice. She reached out and pulled him up to sit down, saying, "My father doesn't seem to be in good health recently. I called him, but he was either sleeping or coughing. I asked him what happened, but he didn't tell me. Old Shen, let's go back to Yuntown to see him." "Sure." Shenjilia looked at her. "I'll drop by Kingstown on the way to see Lily's children." Yi Qianqian gave him a look of disdain. "You never forget to take care of the children wherever you go." Shenjilia stood up and gently nudged her shoulder with his. He winked at her and said, "I like it." His feminine voice gave Yi Qianqian goosebumps. He rubbed his arms and hurriedly walked to the dining table. "Let's go tomorrow. I'm worried that Dad might get sick. You should ask for leave from the hospital." "So urgent?" Shenjilia picked up his phone. "All right, let's go. Tomorrow is Saturday. Come back on Wednesday." Yi Qianqian looked at him and smiled brightly. "Okay." How could Shenjilia refuse? With a chuckle, he replied, "All right." When Shen Manting walked out with the baby in her arms, Shen Luoan was indeed standing in the garden. He seemed to be pulling out weeds for an unknown plant. His movements were slow and elegant, and he looked like he was taking his time. "Daddy!" Little Moon was already one step ahead of her and shouted. He swung his legs in Shen Manting's arms. The little boy wasn't heavy, but he was still quite strong. Shen Manting couldn't carry him anymore. She loosened her grip and bent down to put him down. Chapter 2059. Shen Manting couldn't help but rub her sore hands. Shen Luoan saw it and stood up, patted the dust off his hands, and asked, "What's wrong?" "My hands are sore." Shen Manting rubbed her arms and glanced at Little Moon, who was squatting on the ground to pull weeds. "The little guy is quite heavy. Don't hold him for too long in the future." Shen Luoan patted the dust off his hands, reached out to hold her arm, and slowly rubbed it for her. "Your hand was injured, and it may be very uncomfortable if it bears heavy weights for too long." "Oh." Shen Manting bit her lip and chuckled. "I know. Let's go and take our son back for breakfast. I want to go for a walk." Shen Manting looked at him. "Honey, take me for a walk. I haven't been around here much." In the past few days, Shen Luoan had driven her out. However, she had never been out of the neighborhood. Occasionally, she felt that the neighborhood was very familiar, but it was indeed very strange. Hearing Shen Manting's request, Shen Luoan glanced at her, and his heart was slightly moved. Take a walk in the neighborhood. If they walked in the neighborhood, they would inevitably pass by the small park and the basketball court. Shen Manting's desperate hysteria on that night 2 years ago still seemed to echo in his ears. He would never forget that look for the rest of his life. In the face of her expectant and longing gaze, Shen Luoan was a little afraid to look at it. Soon, he looked away. He looked at his son, who was squatting on the ground and playing with weeds, and said slowly, "Let's have breakfast first. There's nothing to see around here." "Oh." Shen Manting looked a little disappointed. "Then let's go in first." Shen Luoan didn't dare to look at her and responded in a low voice. When it was time for breakfast, Shenjilia and Yi Qianqian were almost done. Shenjilia stood up, and before he left, he suddenly remembered something and said, "Brother, I'm going back to Yuntown with Qianqian tomorrow. Don't go to the laboratory for the next 2 days. Stay at home with the child and sister-in-law." Sister-in-law. These 2 words came out of Shenjilia's mouth, and it was indescribably pleasing to the ear. She couldn't help but glance at him and say, "Got it. You can go. You haven't been taking care of my child for long, so don't take credit here." "Hey," Shenjilia wiped the corner of his mouth and said with a look of helplessness and disdain, "You're burning the bridge after crossing the river." Before sister-in-law woke up, Qianqian, Dad, and I took care of him together. You're always running around in the laboratory, and little you, almost doesn't recognize his father anymore." Little Moon raised his head when he heard his name being called. He looked at Shenjilia and then at Shen Luoan. Her little hand was holding a plastic spoon, and she was chewing on the porridge. Shenjilia looked at him and clicked his tongue. "Look at your table manners. Look at how you're eating." Little Moon ignored him and lowered his head to continue eating. "That's enough. Let's go." Shen Luoan couldn't stand it anymore. You're affecting my son's meal by standing here. Shenjilie replied, You're heartless. He left quickly. When Shenjilie entered the room, Yi Qianqian was packing her clothes. When she saw Shenjilie come in, Yi Qianqian didn't even look up and said, It shouldn't be too cold in Yuntown. Oh, by the way, Tong Tong is getting married next month. She wants us to go together. No, Shenjilie said without hesitation. What does her marriage have to do with me? Chapter 2060. We're friends, after all. Why don't we go when we get married? Yi Qianqian glanced at him. You're a man. Why are you so petty? I'm not going. Shenjilie looked as if there was no room for negotiation. But who is she married? Oh, her colleague in the company. He looks quite honest. You've met him? I've seen his picture. Yi Qianqian folded the clothes and put them in her suitcase. I think he's pretty good. Tisk, that's why I say you women only know how to bully honest people. What did honest people do? Yi Qianqian said. Tong Tong is also very honest. Other than her current husband, she hasn't had a boyfriend. Shenjilie didn't say anything and helped her fold the clothes. What time is it? Aren't you going to work? Yi Qianqian glanced at the time. Buddy, it's 8:30. Shenjilie placed the folded clothes on the bed and leaned over. Kiss me. Yi Qianqian replied, No. Kiss me. No. Yi Qianqian turned her head away in disgust and stuffed the folded clothes into her suitcase. Shenjilie leaned forward. Then I'll kiss you. As he said this, he leaned over and pinched her chin. Yi Qianqian's face was straightened, and she was kissed. Yi Qianqian's face was squeezed out of shape. She turned her head away, but Shenjilie picked her up and threw her on the bed. Shenjilie pressed his body down and held her hands in place as he kissed her. Let's go. Yi Qianqian was still firmly trapped. After struggling for a while, she simply gave up. When Shenjilie was in the mood for kissing, he opened his mouth and bit her. Ouch! Shenjilie didn't let go. He pulled away and said, Are you really going to bite me? Yi Qianqian didn't feel guilty when she saw him like this. She shouted, Hurry up and go to work. How dare you bite me? Shenjilie clenched his teeth. With a fierce look on his face, he rubbed his hands together and looked like a hooligan. He touched her waist and shouted, I'm not going to work. Ah! Yi Qianqian screamed, but with a smile. Go away, you pervert. You're committing adultery in broad daylight. So be it. Shenjilie lifted her clothes. I'm coming. Yi Qianqian hugged his head and laughed. In ancient times, you would be drowned in a pig cage. Humph. Shenjilie responded with a groan. He opened his mouth and sucked on her soft, snow-white lips. However, just as he was about to eat, he heard a clear knock on the door. Both Shenjilie and Yi Qianqian froze and turned their heads to look. The white door was ajar, and the knocking continued. Shen Luo'an's voice could be heard. Can you close the door a little? There are children inside. Yi Qianqian's face suddenly turned red. He kicked Shenjilie away and said, ****, how dare you not close the door? Shenjilie couldn't remember whether he had closed the door or not. After being kicked, his anger subsided a little. He straightened his clothes and got out of bed. Shen Luo'an stood nearby, and Shen Manting's face was already flushed. Shenjilie was a little embarrassed. He coughed lightly, and his cheeks were a little hot. He said awkwardly, I was just joking. I'm about to go to work. Shen Luo'an glanced at him. You could have left a long time ago. You're a bad influence on children. Chapter 2061. Shenjilie was even more embarrassed. He simply turned around and walked back without explaining. When he saw Yi Qianqian sitting there with a straight face, he coughed softly and said, "I told you not to stay at home. It's so embarrassing." Yi Qianqian raised her eyebrows and asked, "Who's to blame?" Shenjilia said, "Me." Shenjilia finally went to work. When he went out, Shen Luoan was not calm. His body, which had not been nourished for a long time, was extremely tense at this moment. In the past 3 years, he had also thought about it. But it had never been as turbulent as it was today. He tensed up and looked at Shen Manting. Shen Manting was too thin and looked like she did not have much flesh. And, no way. She would hate him. Shen Luoan took a long breath and walked back to the room. Shen Manting blushed a little, but when she saw him walking back to the room, she quickly followed him. Little Moon was squatting on the ground playing with a model plane, unaware of what had happened between the adults. Shen Manting called out, "Hubby." "Yes?" Shen Luoan was very anxious, and when he saw her follow him in, he became even more restless. The anger that he had not felt for a long time surged, and the desire that had been suppressed for a long time was once again easily aroused. However, when he saw her innocent expression, he could only forcibly suppress his anger. He forced himself to calm down and looked at her, asking, "What's wrong?" "I think Jilia and Qianqian are very happy. They look so happy every day." Shen Manting looked at him with a pair of sparkling eyes. She looked at him and said, "I think they are like a real husband and wife." When Shen Luoan heard this, he seemed to have read between the lines. He glanced at her and asked, "What do you think about us?" Shen Manting looked at him and said softly, "I don't think we are as husband and wife as they are. I always feel that something is missing." As she spoke, Shen Manting stepped forward and said, "That's why I think I want to be a good wife, but I still feel that something is missing." As she spoke, Shen Manting took another step forward. Shen Luoan hurriedly took a step back and looked at her. His body was even more tense. Shen Manting's fair face was flushed as if she had applied rouge. She looked particularly charming. Her appearance was so cute that it made people want to directly crush her. His Adam's apple tightened. He averted his eyes and said, "Don't let your imagination run wild. We're fine." "No, I think there's something missing." Shen Manting was usually quite obedient, but for some reason, she seemed very stubborn today. "I think you know what it is, don't you?" Shen Manting took a step closer. "Hubby, you must know why. If Jilia and Qianqian can play like that, why don't you play with me?" Shen Luoan stepped back, not daring to look at her. He walked to the door and said, "We're not children anymore. There's nothing fun here. Jilia and sister-in-law are still children at heart. We've grown up and are adults. We can't be compared to them." Shen Luoan noticed that her eyes had turned red. Shen Manting looked as if something extremely heartbreaking had happened to her, and soon, big drops of tears fell from her eyes. "Jilia likes Qianqian, so he plays with her. You don't play with me because you don't like me, right?" Shen Manting sobbed. "You don't like me at all, do you?" Her simple and innocent words silenced Shen Luoan. "After reading it, you can go and read the new book. It's also free. The cute, handsome, and tough male lead, Big Lock. You won't be disappointed after reading it. It's so good." Chapter 2062. How could he not like her? It was precisely because he liked her so much that he was worried about her gains and losses. It was precisely because he loved her so much that he was afraid. Shen Luoan's chest ached, and the burning desire in his body subsided a little. The door of the room was open. Nanny he heard the movement inside and came over to take a look. She was a little worried. But soon, she turned around and carried the child. Shen Luoan clearly sensed the movement behind him. He looked at Shen Manting in front of him and sighed softly. He walked up to her and gently held her in his arms. Shen Manting sniffled, raised her hand to wipe her face, and hugged Shen Luo'an tightly. Manting. Shen Luo'an's voice sounded a little drawn out, with a soft sigh. When Shen Manting heard his voice and felt the clear warmth in front of her, her tears stopped. She buried her cheek in his arms and answered in a nasal voice, "Hubby." It was a greeting in 2 words. Shen Luo'an had heard it for several days, but he was still not used to it. He was very happy to hear such an affectionate greeting, which he had longed for a long time, come out of her mouth. Shen Luo'an was a little greedy as he gently kissed her hair. Shen Manting was tickled by his kiss. It was a little comfortable, but also a little uncomfortable. She couldn't describe the feeling and subconsciously avoided it. Shen Luo'an quickly released her and said softly, "I'm a little busy today. I have to go to the laboratory. You and the baby should be good at home." Shen Manting couldn't describe the feeling in her heart. It was a little sour and a little sad. However, his explanation made her feel a little less angry. Shen Manting nodded and put her hands on his shoulders. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him gently on the lips. She said softly, "Come back soon." Shen Luo'an was moved, and his heart was even more shaken. He looked at her deeply and only said one word, "Okay." Shen Manting looked into his eyes and felt that there seemed to be endless information in them. She couldn't understand it. But she could tell that he didn't dislike her. He liked her. Realizing this, Shen Manting smiled through her tears. She glanced at his clothes and said, "Hubby, I learned how to tie a tie yesterday. Shall I tie a tie for you?" "Huh?" Shen Luo'an was a little surprised. "Who did you learn it from?" "There's a TV on the phone." "I learned from the TV on the phone." As Shen Manting spoke, she walked inside and found a man's tie that had been left unused in the cloakroom for a long time. The light red and dark red checkered tie looked very exquisite and formal. Shen Luo'an was wearing very simple clothes. He didn't usually need to wear such formal clothes when he went to the laboratory. But when he saw her pick up her tie, he couldn't help but look forward to it. Looking at her expectant smile and her sparkling big eyes, he couldn't help but smile. He stroked her head and said, "Then I'll go change my clothes." Shen Luo'an walked into the cloakroom. As soon as he took off his coat, he saw Shen Manting looking at him with a burning gaze. The fire that had just calmed down was once again easily ignited by her at this moment. His throat tightened, and he closed the door uneasily. When he came out, he had already changed into a formal suit. Chapter 2063. Am I handsome? Shen Luo'an glanced at his attire and smiled. It's not easy to hear a compliment from you. He. Shen Manting's eyes sparkled. She tightened her tie and said, "If you like it, I'll praise you every day." As he spoke, he hopped forward and said, "I'll help you with your tie." She was in high spirits. She stood on her tiptoes and put the tie around his neck. Shen Luo'an had never experienced such a feeling. This feeling of being treasured by her, desired by her, fawned over by her. His heart was filled with warmth as he stared at her fixedly with a pair of eyes. Shen Manting's face was flushed as she concentrated on helping him tie his tie. Like this. Shen Manting muttered to herself as she twirled the tie around, but it didn't seem right no matter how hard she tried. How can it be wrong? That's exactly what the TV said. She scratched her head, but when she looked up, she saw that Shen Luo'an was looking at her. She didn't know when it started, but that gaze seemed to want to need her deeply. Shen Manting blushed and said, "I forgot how to do it." "It's okay." Shen Luo'an looked at her. "Take your time." Shen Manting nodded and continued to work. However, his unwavering determination just now had been defeated. Shen Manting felt her face getting hotter and hotter, and her movements became slower and slower. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore. She stomped her feet and said, "Aya, don't keep looking at me. I was so nervous that I didn't know what to do." Shen Luo chuckled and looked away. "Then I won't look at you." Shen Manting didn't believe him and quietly lifted her eyes to peek at him. She realized that Shen Luo was really not looking at her anymore. It was as if he did not care at all. This feeling made Shen Manting even more unhappy. He flung his necktie and said, "Forget it, I can't handle it." Shen Luo couldn't help but laugh. His heart was surrounded by a thick and sweet feeling. Looking at her little face, which was full of excitement just a moment ago, suddenly looking like a frosted eggplant, he actually felt very satisfied. He couldn't help but hug her. His actions were a little sudden. Shen Manting was shocked and froze. She looked at the frightened expression on his face. "Manting." Shen Luo embraced her and called out softly, "Manting, Manting." "Ah." Shen Manting looked at him timidly and shrank back. She was a little uncertain and asked, "Hubby, are you stupid?" The smile on Shen Luo's face widened. He pinched her chin with his palm and swallowed her sweetness. Shen Manting only felt that it was a little sudden, but very quickly, her body seemed to have turned into a pool of spring water, indescribably soft. Shen Luo gradually moved deeper and deeper, sweeping her out to be with him. His kiss, very deep, very heavy. It was deeper and more dizzying than the last time. Shen Manting's hands unconsciously climbed onto his shoulders, and her whole body seemed to have lost all its strength as she hung onto his body. His body was getting closer and closer. Shen Manting could clearly feel his desire and passion. Between her waist and abdomen, a burning hot unknown object was pressing against her. It was a strange and unfamiliar feeling that made her a little uncomfortable. Shen Manting was a little curious. She put her hand down and touched it tentatively. In an instant, Shen Luo's entire body tensed up. Chapter 2064. Shen Luo's eyes were as deep as the sea, dark and bottomless. Shen Manting vaguely felt a sense of danger, and the sense of danger made her look forward to it. Shen Luo's tender hands were still resting on the bed, and he was so stiff that he was close to going crazy. "Manting." Shen Luo's voice was low and husky. He pressed against her, and the deep desire in his voice moved her. "Honey." Shen Manting suddenly felt a little scared, and she only felt that her palms were getting hotter and hotter. She quickly withdrew her hands, but she heard Shen Luo say in a low voice, "Don't move." Shen Manting was shocked, and she didn't dare to move. At the same time, she looked at him in confusion and asked timidly, "What?" When Shen Luo saw her like this, he immediately felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. His originally tense body became more and more uncomfortable. Shen Luo closed his eyes, put her down, and said hoarsely, "Nothing." When Shen Manting saw that he was about to leave, she felt a little empty in her heart. She held his hand and said, "Honey." Shen Luo was even more angry, and he suppressed the most primitive desire in his heart and looked at her. The lights in the cloakroom were not turned on. Compared to the outside, the light inside was very dim. Shen Manting's eyes seemed to be shining, and she looked at him, pulled his hand, and said, "You just kissed me so happily." Boom! Her words were like the blazing sun that was shot out of the darkness. In an instant, the light around them suddenly burst, and Shen Luo was even more unable to control himself. He held her hand and pulled her into his arms. Even Shen Luo himself didn't know what he was going to do. It was completely a subconscious action, and when he came to himself, Shen Manting was already in his arms. Shen Manting looked up at Shen Luo. Her pair of big eyes were full of doubt. Looking at Shen Luo, she said softly, "Honey, you look so different today." Shen Luo's throat was even more tight, and he asked hoarsely, "What's different?" "What's different?" Shen Manting couldn't say it, and facing Shen Luo's burning gaze, her cheeks became even hotter, and she said, "It's different. Everything is different." But when he looked down, he saw the protruding bulge. She couldn't help but reach out and poke him. Shen Luo, who was above her, immediately drew in a sharp breath. "Don't move." Shen Luo's voice was low and hoarse. He seemed to be enduring it. "Don't move." Shen Manting was a little shocked. She quickly withdrew her hand and asked, "Dear, are you feeling unwell? Uncomfortable?" How could he be comfortable when he was already like this? Shen Luo blushed and pressed her hand down. Shen Manting only felt a burning sensation on her skin. She looked up at him in confusion. "If I'm not feeling well, can you help me?" "Of course." Shen Manting looked at him. "I'll go get the medicine from Nanny He." As he spoke, he struggled to get up. But before she could move, Shen Luo pulled her back. "You're my medicine." Shen Manting was stunned and looked at him. Then, she said with some fear, "Hubby, are you going to eat me?" Shen Luo's expression deepened. "Can I?" His voice was low and hoarse, and he asked with desire. Shen Manting looked at him and shrank back. She said, I heard that eating human flesh is not good for the body, and it's sour." Chapter 2065. She shrunk back and forth in Shen Luo's arms. Shen Luo couldn't help laughing when he saw her cute and scared look. "What if I have to eat you?" Shen Luo looked at her, pressed her against the door, and rubbed her gently. "I won't feel uncomfortable after eating you." Shen Manting was slightly stunned, and her whole body was hot. She blushed even more, looked away, and said nervously and fearfully, "Then, if you will feel better after eating me, then you eat me." As she said that, she rolled up her sleeves with trembling hands and stretched out her white and tender hands in front of Shen Luo. "Bite me. If I'm still alive, remember to send me to the hospital." Although she said that, Shen Manting's eyes were already red. She looked at him with a pleading look. Obviously, she was very scared. Shen Luo laughed even louder, lifted her up, and lifted her clothes with his palm. "Hubby." Shen Manting was a little scared and wanted to hold him down, but she couldn't stop him at all. Shen Luo's hand had already reached into her clothes and pinched her lovely white and tender hands. A strange feeling arose from that place. Shen Manting couldn't help but scream, "Hubby." Shen Luo didn't make a sound, and he lowered his head to take all her words into his mouth. He gently licked and kissed her, and heavily teased her. "Oh. Shen Manting couldn't help but breathe heavily because of his familiar movements. Hearing her voice, Shen Luo couldn't help but lower his head and bite her white and erect breasts. He ravaged and sucked, and Shen Manting felt like she was bitten by ants all over, and it was extremely uncomfortable. She couldn't help but make a strange sound, but it was just a sound, and Shen Manting quickly covered her mouth. But her body was still being teased, and the strange and turbulent feeling crushed what little was left of her rationality. She couldn't help but squint her eyes and hold his head with both hands. She clasped her legs around his, and even her toes curled up. She felt uncomfortable all over, but it seemed quite comfortable. "Daddy." A childish voice suddenly broke in. The world that had been surging with dark waves was like a mirror that had been shattered by a single punch. Shen Luo's movements immediately froze, and Shen Manting breathed a sigh of relief. When Shen Manting realized that she had been put down, she hurriedly tugged at her clothes. His face had already turned red, and his body was burning hot. Shen Manting stumbled out of the room in a hurry. When she saw her son enter the room, she picked up the infant and sat on the bed. His heart was still beating fast, and he could not help but look at the cloakroom. Shen Luo walked out from inside. His clothes were disheveled, and the tie around his neck was crooked. Shen Manting couldn't help but take a second look at his tall figure. Shen Luo and didn't linger and quickly entered the bathroom. She heard the sound of water splashing, and she found it a little strange. Bathing at this time? Aren't you going to work? Just as he was feeling puzzled, Nanny he entered the room. The moment Nanny he saw Shen Manting's swollen lips and messy clothes, as well as the sound of running water in the bathroom, she knew what had happened. She hurried forward and held the little boy's hand. Let's go. Grandma made you something to eat. I'll feed you, Nanny he said. Xiao Yu pouted unhappily and turned around to hug Shen Manting. I don't want to eat, Mommy. Chapter 2066. She stood up with the baby in her arms and said, I'll go feed him. What did you make? Her cheeks were a little red, and she looked very shy. Nanny he looked at her with an ambiguous expression and said, I made some colorful noodles with vegetable powder. It's very nutritious. Okay. Shen Manting walked out, and Yi Qianqian walked out at the same time. Qianqian. Shen Manting looked at Yi Qianqian and said, You're out. Yi Qianqian blinked. She felt a little uncomfortable being called that. Especially when she thought of what had happened just now, she felt even more embarrassed. Yi Qianqian nodded and forced herself to calm down. What's wrong? Nothing. Shen Manting was a little hesitant, but she quickly said, Are you going out later? No. Yi Qianqian felt that she wanted to say something but stopped. Do you have something to say? Well, I have something to ask you. Let's go out for a walk later. Shen Manting smiled. I have a lot to ask you. Okay. Yi Qianqian agreed. Looking at her expectant look, she felt a little strange. Call me later. Okay. Shen Manting sat on the sofa and fed the baby. Little Moon ate happily while twisting the little toy in his hand. He suddenly looked up and mumbled with his mouth full, Daddy. Shen Luo was still in the same outfit, but he didn't wear his tie. When he heard the little boy's shout, he went forward and rubbed his head. He said to someone, I'm going to work. Wait for me to come back. He was looking at the little boy, but Shen Manting knew that he was talking to her. She nodded and replied softly, Okay. Shen Luo left quickly. Shen Manting stared at his back, her heart filled with satisfaction. She felt even more embarrassed when she thought of Shen Luo's intimate actions just now. She also felt strange in her body. It was very strange. Shen Manting didn't know what this feeling was, but it seemed that she liked it. Shen Luo left quickly. Shen Manting was a little absent-minded as she fed the baby. Nanny he noticed and said, If you have something to do, go ahead. I'll feed the baby. There's no need for that. Nanny you can go about your business. I'll do it. Shen Manting insisted. After feeding the baby, she took him to play in the garden. Looking at Little Moon bouncing up and down, Shen Manting felt the happiness of a mother. That's great. Yi Qianqian's voice came from behind. In the blink of an eye, the child has grown up so much. Yi Qianqian looked at the little boy and turned to look at Shen Manting. I really envy you. Why are you envious of me? Shen Manting looked at her in confusion. I'm envious of you. I think you're pretty and sensible. Jilia seems to like you very much. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but take another look at her and said, You've indeed changed. Manting, it's better for you to stay like this. Is that so? Shen Manting was a little embarrassed. My husband seems to think so too. Did he say anything to you? Shen Manting shook her head. He didn't say anything, but I could feel that he was thinking the same thing. Chapter 2067. Yi Qianqian thought about it and explained, Actually, it's not that I don't like you. I just like the way you are right now. You look happy every day. You don't remember anything, so you don't feel any pain. It's pretty good. Was it painful for me before? Shen Manting was a little puzzled. I feel like I'm the one who's in pain now that I don't know anything. Hubby always calls me Manting, 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 but I don't feel happy at all. I feel so sad. After all, she was a 12-year-old girl and didn't know how to hide her emotions at all. Yi Qianqian looked at her pouting face and turned her head away. She seemed to be sighing with emotion as she said meaningfully, "He loves you." "I know," Shen Manting replied with a smile on her face. However, within a few seconds, her smile disappeared and she said, "But he won't play with me." Yi Qianqian was speechless. Looking at Shen Manting's angry face, she didn't seem to be joking. It was at that moment that Yi Qianqian once again realized that this was a 12-year-old girl. Yi Qianqian thought for a moment and explained, "Perhaps Big Brother is busy." She glanced at Shen Manting's expression and deliberated over her choice of words before saying, "Moreover, he's more mature and steady. Normally, I don't think he'll play much." The more Yi Qianqian thought about it, the more convinced she became. She finally made up her mind and nodded her head. "He's always been so serious. Don't mind him too much." "But, why can Julia play with you?" Shen Manting was puzzled. Yi Qianqian was surprised. "Huh? You had so much fun this morning." Shen Manting looked at him enviously and said, "My husband never plays with me. I want to play too." Yi Qianqian was speechless. She thought Shen Manting was talking about the game of eagle catches chicks or hide and seek. Hearing this, he coughed lightly and said, "Well, what we did this morning can't be considered as playing." "Huh?" Shen Manting was a little confused. "But you're smiling so happily. Aren't you playing?" Yi Qianqian felt a little embarrassed and replied, "Well, not really. Besides, I'm not that happy either." "Yes." Shen Manting was very certain. "You're so happy." Yi Qianqian replied, "Well, be happy then." "Humph. You're still trying to deceive me." Shen Manting looked as if she had already seen through him. Yi Qianqian felt even more embarrassed. When she saw Yi Qianqian's expression, she explained in all seriousness, "I didn't. We weren't actually playing. To be exact, we were flirting." Shen Manting's eyes widened when she heard that word. Flirt? She looked as if Yi Qianqian had said something unbelievable. Yi Qianqian suddenly felt guilty for lying to a little girl. When she saw the expression on Yi Qianqian's face, she turned her head away and said, "Yeah. We're husband and wife. It's normal for us to flirt and play around, then why doesn't my husband flirt with me?" Yi Qianqian replied, "I can't answer your question." "Why?" Shen Manting was puzzled. Yi Qianqian was silent for a moment before she said, "How about this? When Big Brother comes home at night, you can ask him. You can say, 'Honey, why aren't you flirting with me? Look at the people next door, they're all flirting.'" Chapter 2068. Yi Qianqian said, "That's not the point. The point is that you have to ask him. You shouldn't be asking me this kind of question." "Oh, okay." Shen Manting nodded quickly. "I understand. I'll ask him tonight why he didn't flirt with me." Yi Qianqian finally raised her head in relief and said, "Very good, but don't tell him that I taught you. It'll be troublesome if you say that I'm a bad influence on a child." Shen Manting looked at her with a smile and said, "You're the child. I'm taller than you. You're more like a child than me." Yi Qianqian was a little confused. She sighed softly and said, "I shouldn't have told you so much." She seemed to have been a bad influence on her. Shen Manting's temperament, the way she spoke, and the expression in her eyes didn't seem like that of a normal adult. Although she was not mentally retarded, Yi Qianqian could no longer treat her as a peer. Shen Manting looked at her and asked, "How long have you been married to Xilia?" 2 years. Yi Qianqian glanced at Little Moon, who was playing with the grass on the ground. "I got married to old Shen the year Big Brother brought him back." "Then, when did my husband and I get married?" Shen Manting looked at her and said, "I think it's been a long time, but it doesn't seem that long." Shen Manting suddenly felt a little childish when she said that. She coughed and said with a straight face, "That's right. I'm just curious. You're married and you have a ring on your finger." Shen Manting glanced at Yi Qianqian's hand. On the ring finger of her left hand, there was a very shiny and beautiful diamond ring. After a moment, she looked at her somewhat thin hand. Her skin was a little yellow, and it didn't look as good as Yi Qianqian's hand at all. "And I don't have a ring on my finger." Yi Qianqian subconsciously hid her hand when she heard that. Her eyes were a little evasive. She looked into the distance and suddenly felt a little guilty. Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I have a ring? Because Shen Manting and Shen Luo and were not married at all. Shen Manting was not willing to wear Shen Luo An's ring at all. However, even though she knew that, how could she bring it up to Shen Manting? It was difficult to speak at all. He glanced at Shen Manting, coughed softly, and said, "Maybe it's because you've slept for too long. Look at your hand. It's so skinny. How can you wear a ring?" "Yes, yes." Shen Manting felt inexplicably happy when she heard his answer. "That's what I thought too. Actually, I saw a ring in the shape of a heart with many diamonds. It was placed under the blanket, but it was too big for me, so I put it back." Shen Manting spoke with a hint of boastfulness in her voice. "It's very beautiful." As Yi Qianqian watched, she found it amusing and sad at the same time. She nodded her head and reached out to hold Yi Qianqian's hand. In a soft voice, she said, "It's good that you like him. Big Brother actually likes you very much. He loves you very much. As long as you believe in him with all your heart, he won't let you down." Shen Manting felt a little puzzled and didn't quite understand what she meant. She nodded and said, "Yes, I know he loves me very much. I can feel it. No one has ever treated me like this before. I love him very much, too. Yes, I know he loves me very much. I can feel it. No one has ever treated me like this before." Chapter 2069. Huh? Yi Qianqian's eyes widened and she was a little confused. "What did you just say?" Shen Manting thought that she hadn't made herself clear, so she repeated, "Can you teach me how to seduce men?" Yi Qianqian wanted to laugh, but when she saw Shen Manting's serious expression, she couldn't laugh. She coughed lightly. "Actually, I don't know how to do that. As long as a man likes you, you don't have to seduce him. He will come over himself. If he doesn't like you, no matter how you seduce him, it's useless." These words were the truth of the world. When Yi Qianqian said this, she saw that Shen Manting had a look of understanding on her face. "Then, do I still have to seduce my husband?" Shen Manting looked a little defeated. "I think my husband likes me, but sometimes I feel that he doesn't like me that much. Yesterday, I used my phone to check it out and tried to imitate what's written on it, but I realized that it didn't work." "What things?" "Prepare the bath water for my husband, shave, tie his tie, and give him a good morning kiss." Wow, Yi Qianqian was a little surprised. "You did all that?" "A little, tisk, tisk." Yi Qianqian laughed even more. She didn't know how she felt, but she said, "I've never done those things that you mentioned." Moreover, Shenjilia had always been the one who prepared the bath water for her. Well, in all fairness, Shenjilia was really good to her. Although he had been a little demanding in some aspects recently, at least he was wholeheartedly devoted to her. Shen Manting felt a little embarrassed, and her cheeks turned slightly red. She said, "Oh, it's my first time being someone else's wife. I don't know what to do. As she said this, she pouted and said, Qianqian, teach me what I should do. Otherwise, I don't know what to do to be a wife. It's very simple. You just have to take care of the child. Yi Qianqian shrugged. The child is still young. You have to take care of the child and let him worry less. That's a good wife. Oh. Shen Manting nodded and couldn't help but ask curiously, since you don't have children, what do you usually do when you have nothing to do? Yi Qianqian replied. Give birth. Oh. Shen Manting looked at her belly and asked, are you going to have a baby? Yi Qianqian rubbed her belly and smiled bitterly. I'll give birth once I'm pregnant. The key was that she couldn't get pregnant. In the past 2 years, they had not taken any safety measures. She just couldn't get pregnant. This year, she was already 28 years old. If she delayed any longer, she might become an elderly pregnant woman. Moreover, if Grandma and Uncle Blind were right, this year, it was very likely that she could get pregnant. She looked at Little Moon, who was having a great time playing by himself. She felt a twinge of jealousy in her heart and said longingly, that's why I'm so envious of you. You don't know anything when you wake up. You've forgotten all the unhappy things. You even have a cute baby and a man who loves you. Shen Manting sensed that she seemed to be a little sad, so she cautiously said, you have it too. You have to continue living happily. When Yi Qianqian saw the look on her face, a bright smile appeared on her face and she nodded her head. Yeah. Shenjilia came home very early that day, and he seemed to be in a good mood. Chapter 2070. Little Moon looked at him and gave him a peck on the cheek. Shenjilia smiled and asked, where's your aunt? The little guy's eyes were big, black, and bright. He pointed to the room and said, Sen Senior, Auntie, lift your tongue. Shenjilia pinched his cheek. Tell me, Auntie. Sen. Little Moon grinned and wiggled his little body excitedly. Uncle. Humph, little rascal, Shenjilia said as he placed him on the sofa. He looked up and saw Shen Manting walking out of the kitchen with a plate of fruit in her hand. Sister-in-law, Qianqian and I are going back to Yuntown for a while. Well, Yuntown is Qianqian's hometown, right? She gave him a watermelon. Qianqian told me about it. Go ahead. I'll go in first then. Shenjilia took a bite of the watermelon, then stood up and pushed the door open. Honey, I'm back. Yi Qianqian was sleeping. When she heard Shenjilia's voice, she covered her head with the blanket and shouted, don't be noisy. Shenjilia took off his shoes and leaned over. He pulled down the blanket and teased, you're sleeping so early? Were you tired last night? You still have the nerve to say that? Yi Qianqian lifted the blanket and said angrily, I haven't been feeling well for the past few days, and you deliberately messed with me. How did I do that? Shenjilia looked aggrieved. He leaned over and whispered, aren't I working hard for our future happiness? Scram. Shenjilia laughed out loud and tugged at her. Let's go. If we rush back to Yuntown now, we can still take Dad out for dinner. I've already told him. What time is it? It's 4:00. The plane leaves at 5:30. Yi Qianqian immediately stood up and said, wait for me. By the time Yi Qianqian finished washing up, more than 10 minutes had passed. Shenjilia had it simple. He pulled his suitcase up and went to the door to wait for her. On his way out, Shenjilia noticed that Shen Manting seemed to be glancing at him a few times. She couldn't help but ask, sister-in-law, do you need something from me? Shen Manting shook her head and said, no. Oh. Shenjilia looked away, but after a while, he felt that she was looking at him again. Shen Manting looked up and immediately averted her eyes. Shenjilia found it a little strange, but soon, Yi Qianqian came out. As the couple walked out of the house, Shenjilia whispered, "Why do I feel that Sister Manting is acting a little strange today?" Yi Qianqian was shocked, but she quickly pretended to be calm and asked, "How so?" "That's right. I think she's peeking at me." Shenjilia felt goosebumps all over his body. She's only 12 years old at the moment. Don't tell me she fell in love with me because I'm handsome. Go away. Yi Qianqian shot him a look of disdain. How can you be so shameless? I think, she might want to ask you something. What is it? Ahem, she kept pestering me with questions for the whole day, so I just gave her a CD. Shenjilia had a bad feeling about this. What disc? It's the one you brought back last time. Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed and ran forward. Shenjilia was dumbfounded. He quickly chased after her and shouted, "Are you crazy? Big Brother is going to kill me." Chapter 2071. Shenjilia was actually convinced by her fallacious reasoning. But he still felt strange in his heart, so he followed her and said, "Wait for me." Shen Manting took care of the child while he ate and bathed. She finally managed to coax him to sleep before she went to wash up. When she came out, it was already past 8 o'clock, but Shen Luo still hadn't returned. Shen Manting was a little bored, so she took out the thing that Yi Qianqian had given her in the afternoon. It was a small, round box with a CD inside. The CD was two-sided and had no pictures. She followed the method that Yi Qianqian had taught her in the afternoon. She first locked the door, then turned on the computer in the room, and then inserted the CD into it. Her fingers touched the touch panel a few times, and after clicking the mouse, an image appeared. A drunken man, wearing a suit, stumbled back home. Soon, a woman who looked very conservatively opened the door and carried him in. She spoke in a strange language that Shen Manting couldn't understand at all. After watching for a while, Shen Manting finally understood. The husband was probably drunk. When he returned home, the wife brought a basin of water, wrung out a towel, and wiped the husband's face and hands. She also took off the husband's suit, and then took off his shoes. Shen Manting secretly noted it down and thought to herself, "The next time my husband comes home drunk, I'll take care of him like this." But in the TV, the husband was sleeping on the sofa, so when the time came, she would directly carry her husband to the big bed. But as she continued to watch, something didn't seem right. The wife began to cry, and as she cried, the husband seemed to become impatient and kicked his wife. Shen Manting saw it and felt a little angry. That's so annoying. How dare he hit his wife? But then she saw the wife stand up and walk away. Well done. Shen Manting was angry, and then she applauded her wife. But then, the husband seemed to have a look of regret on his face. He stood up and staggered back to the room with his wife. Back in the room, the wife sat on the bed and cried bitterly. When she saw her husband come in, she stopped crying and didn't dare to move. The husband went forward, pinched his wife's chin, and kissed her. Shen Manting's eyes widened, and she couldn't believe what she saw. Weren't they just arguing? What was even more unbelievable was that the woman did not resist and hugged the man. After kissing for a few minutes, they began to undress. Shen Manting was actually a little excited. She hugged her legs and sat on the bed with great interest. Soon, the husband's shirt was taken off, and the wife was only left with a white bra. Her husband pushed the bra up and bit her. Shen Manting subconsciously covered her small chest. She was suddenly reminded of what Shen Luo had done to her in the morning. Then, he heard an ambiguous voice coming from the woman's mouth. Shen Manting covered her mouth, and her cheeks turned red. It was the same feeling she had in the morning. She felt a little uncomfortable, and as she watched, she felt more and more uncomfortable. As the scene on the television became more and more intense, the wife placed her palm on the place where her husband peed. It was so big. It was completely different from Little Moon's. Shen Manting suddenly realized that the spot she had poked several times in the morning. Wasn't that the spot? Heavens! Chapter 2072. Then, his wife ate the thing in one bite. Shen Manting was a little shocked and watched with her eyes wide open. However, she didn't expect that the man not only didn't seem to be in pain, but also enjoyed it. Ah. The man's voice was extremely embarrassing. Shen Manting couldn't help but rub her legs. When she was about to continue watching, she suddenly heard the sound of the door opening. Perhaps the door couldn't be opened, so someone knocked on it from outside. Shen Manting quickly closed the computer, got out of bed, and opened the door. Shen Luoan looked a little tired. When he saw her, he smiled slightly. He reached out to touch her head and said, "Why did you lock the door all of a sudden?" Shen Manting felt even more uncomfortable. She looked away guiltily and said, "Why did you come back so late? It's only 9 o'clock. It's not late." Shen Luoan walked in and closed the door. "I'll come back early tomorrow." However, when the light in the room was turned on, he could clearly see her face. He reached out to touch it, and it was indeed a little hot. Shen Luoan frowned and had a bad feeling. "What's wrong with you? Why is your face so red?" Shen Manting lowered her head and quickly took his hand away. She mumbled, "Well, I'll go run the bathwater for you." After that, she quickly turned around and went to the bathroom. Shen Manting turned on the faucet and heard the sound of running water. She finally breathed a sigh of relief. When she thought of the image on the computer, she felt even more ashamed. It was too perverted. How could Yi Qianqian show her such a thing? "Qianqian, I don't think the 10 little things on the internet are very useful. Do you have any way to make my husband like me more?" "Well, there is, but it's not very suitable for you." "What way?" "I can do it. It's not convenient for me to say, but if you are interested, I can give you a CD. You can watch it whenever you want, but you must watch it at night. Don't watch it during the day. When you watch it, lock the door and wait for your husband to come back. He will like you." "Really? Really, you can try it." "Well, thank you so much, Qianqian." She thought it would be similar to the 10 little things, but she didn't expect it to be. Shen Manting's mind was buzzing, but suddenly, she remembered. It seems the computer is still on the bed. She immediately stood up and jogged out of the room. The sound of water was getting softer and softer, but at the same time, another sound was getting louder and louder. Shen Manting's body tensed up, and she immediately heard the man's panting. "Don't look." Shen Manting hurried forward, covered the laptop, and hid it behind her. His face was already as red as an apple. I didn't know it was such a thing." Shen Manting stammered. "Someone gave it to me. Who gave it to you?" Shen Luoan walked over and stood in front of her. He looked at her with a burning gaze. Shen Manting felt an itch in her heart. She looked at him and said, "Qianqian gave it to me." "Why did she give you this?" She said. Shen Manting was extremely embarrassed. "I asked her how I could make you like me more. She told me to lock the door and watch this so that you would like me more, so I watched it." Shen Manting said. Chapter 2073. Shen Luoan's eyes darkened. He took the computer from her hand and said, "She didn't mean to let you watch it secretly." "What?" Shen Manting couldn't react for a moment. "Go inside and turn off the water." Shen Luoan turned on the computer again. Shen Manting seemed to know what he meant. She was a little embarrassed and lowered her head, saying, "This is not good." "Go ahead." Shen Luoan rubbed her head and said, "Come back after you're done." "Okay." Shen Manting was very obedient. She obediently went to the bathroom and turned off the water. Turn off the lights, too. When she walked out, she heard Shen Luo say this. At that moment, Shen Luo was sitting in bed with the computer on the quilt. A pair of amber eyes were staring at her. It was very deep, very thick, and very dangerous. Shen Manting was a little scared. She shrank and said, "Honey, come here." Shen Luo waved at her and said, "Come here." Shen Manting bit the bullet and turned off the lights. She took off her slippers and went to bed. Shen Luo clicked a few times on the computer, and then a different picture was played. "Have you seen this movie?" Shen Luo hugged her. "This movie is much better than the one you just watched." Shen Manting looked at the picture that popped up on the computer screen. There were 4 words on it, "Gone with the Wind." For some reason, Shen Manting felt a little disappointed. But she still focused on watching it. The more she watched, the more familiar she felt. She said, "Honey, I've seen this movie." "Okay." Shen Luo answered lightly. "This was your favorite movie. Do you remember what it was about?" Shen Manting only felt that it was familiar, but she couldn't remember what it was about. "I forgot, but I'm sure I've seen it." "I haven't seen it yet. Watch it with me." Shen Luo hugged her in his arms and whispered, "Let me see what your favorite movie is like." "Okay." Shen Manting continued to watch. When she saw that the female lead agreed to marry a little boy for Ashley, she felt a little sad and said, "Will she really marry this person? It's so silly. It's not worth it at all." Shen Luo hugged her and gently kissed her hair. "Yes, it's not worth it." But hadn't Shen Manting done the same thing before? However, Si Jiuli was trying to make Shen Manting stay, while Shen Manting was trying to escape. Shen Manting was very serious. Later, when she saw Scarlett starving and freezing, she felt sympathy for her. When he stole his sister's boyfriend for the sake of money, he felt very angry. But what moved Shen Manting the most was the lines that the male lead, Rhett, said when he asked the female lead to marry him. "You're marrying either an old man or a child. Why don't you try a real man like me?" Shen Manting was a little excited when she read this and said, "It's so romantic. How can Rhett be so handsome?" Shen Luo smiled and held her hand from under the blanket. He said in a low voice, "Marry me." His voice was low, and there was a hint of solicitation in it. Shen Manting thought that he was analyzing the plot of the movie, so she happily kissed him on the cheek and said, after that, they got married. Scarlett married Rhett and gave birth to a child named Bonnie Bai. After she finished speaking, she suddenly came back to her senses and asked, "How did I know?" "Because you've seen it before." Shen Luo pressed her down. "There are some things that you still remember subconsciously. This is my favorite movie, second to none." Chapter 2074. Because you've seen it. Shen Luo pressed her down. "There are some things that you still remember subconsciously." Shen Manting was startled by his sudden movement and blinked her eyes. "Then do you still remember whether you love me?" Shen Luo stared at her with burning eyes. "Follow the truest answer in your heart. Tell me, do you love me?" The sound of the movie came to her ears. Through the light on the screen, Shen Manting could clearly see Shen Luo's expression. He was very serious. Shen Manting was in a trance for a moment. She stared at him blankly. Her heartbeat was very clear and dreamy. Seeing Shen Luo like this, Shen Manting's heart sank slightly. Her eyes became very clear. She couldn't control a thought that was about to come out. "Love." After a long time, Shen Manting answered. There was only Shen Luo's face in her eyes. Shen Manting said seriously, "Love." Shen Luo's eyes were a little red. He slowly tightened his hold on her and said, "Say it again." "Honey, I love you." Shen Manting was very serious and said word by word, "I love you." I really love you. Shen Manting didn't know why when she said these words, her heart ached faintly. But there was unprecedented satisfaction. Shen Manting hugged him back and looked at the computer screen. She saw Rhett holding Si Jiuli and throwing her on the bed to consummate their marriage. Shen Manting was moved. She raised her face and kissed his lips. With shyness, she raised her face and kissed him. Shen Luo'an's heart softened when she kissed him. In a moment, he became the host and held her firmly in his arms. He went deep and pressed her down on the bed. His arms firmly wrapped around her waist. Shen Luo'an's kiss became more and more passionate. Shen Manting suddenly felt that he was different again. He seemed to have changed his attitude from this morning. At that time, he seemed to be patient and restrained. But now, Shen Manting could easily feel that he was ready to attack. Thinking of the scene she just saw on the computer screen, she blushed even more. She subconsciously struggled, but Shen Luo'an seemed to be sure of something. Not only did he not let go, but he also held her hand. Their fingers were interlocked. His warm and rough palm seemed to carry a seductive heat that immediately spread to the bottom of her heart. Shen Manting suddenly felt a little scared. She wanted to push him away, but he easily raised his hand and reached into her pajamas. Shen Luo'an's fingers skillfully and easily undid the buttons on her back. Shen Manting felt something loosen in front of her, and the aftershock made her tremble. She let out a soft moan. It was a little embarrassing, but Shen Manting couldn't help but tremble slightly under his skillful movements. Their bodies were tightly pressed together, and the scorching heat made Shen Manting blush. "Hubby." Shen Manting called out softly, "What do you want?" Shen Luo'an's eyes were burning with passion. Hearing this, she said, "Didn't you ask me what is missing between us?" "Yeah." Shen Manting thought about it for the whole day, but she still couldn't figure out what was missing between them. "Less love." Shen Luo'an said these words softly. After a moment, he continued in a hoarse voice, "Do you know the most important difference between a husband and wife and a friend?" Shen Manting was a little confused and shook her head. Chapter 2075. "But, you just said, it's love," Shen Manting corrected him weakly. Her face was already flushed. Shen Luo'an stared at her and said softly, "Yes, it's called sex." Shen Manting's heart beat faster when she heard the word. She could also clearly feel that Shen Luo'an's heart was beating as fast as hers. "Do you know what sex is?" Shen Luo'an slightly narrowed his eyes. Shen Manting seemed to know, but also seemed to not know. The vague feeling made her shake her head again. Shen Luo'an did not explain, but directly took the computer and directly clicked on the screen that Shen Manting had just seen. He directly fast-forwarded the screen to the most important part, and shameful and intense sounds came from the computer. Shen Manting's head was buzzing, but she could not help but open her eyes wide and look at the screen. "This is sex." Although Shen Luo'an's voice was low, it was very calm. Shen Manting looked at the image on the computer screen and suddenly felt even more uncomfortable. Especially, she wanted to pee, "Hubby." Shen Manting was a little afraid, but she could not help but look forward to it. "Are you going to do these things to me too?" Shen Luo'an had long been unable to resist, and his tight and hot body pressed against her. He could clearly smell the faint fragrance on her body, and the cute look in the corner of the screen, which made it even more difficult for him to control himself. His throat tightened, and he slowly said, "If you are afraid, I will not force you." Shen Manting twisted her body, and a pair of big eyes flashed. Looking at the intense and dazzling scene on the screen, and the sound of slapping made her feel very uncomfortable. Feeling Shen Luo'an's tension, she thought for a moment, and then said softly, "I am a little afraid, but, if you want, I can do it with you. I want." Shen Luo'an did not hide his desire, and deeply pressed against her to let his scorching heat pass to her, and said hoarsely, "But I am afraid." "You are also afraid. Shen Manting blushed, and her eyes were a little unfocused as she looked at the screen. If you are also afraid, then let me help you. Oh, so evil, so shameful. Shen Luoan reached out and closed the computer. All the light in the room had disappeared. Shen Manting turned around and looked at Shen Luoan. I'm afraid that you'll hate me. Shen Luoan's voice was low and almost ethereal. I love you. Shen Manting looked at him earnestly and wrapped her arms around his neck. I won't hate you. Then, marry me, Shen Luoan suddenly said. Marry me, Manting. Shen Manting didn't know what he meant. Could it be that she had not married him yet? However, she had already given birth to the child. Why didn't she marry him? Shen Manting pondered for a moment and asked, Isn't a husband a husband? Why do you want to marry again? No, it's not the same. Shen Luoan looked at her. Will you marry me? You'll marry me for real. We'll have a wedding, a marriage, and love. Shen Manting vaguely seemed to understand something. So they had no wedding, no marriage, no love? How could that be? Shen Manting looked at him with a puzzled look in her eyes. Didn't you love me in the past? Hearing this, Shen Luoan immediately said firmly, love. Chapter 2076. Shen Luoan's eyes darkened, and his throat choked. He twitched the corner of his mouth and asked, Really? Yes. Shen Manting nodded and looked at him firmly. Although I don't remember a lot of things, when you say you love me, I feel very happy. And here. Shen Manting held his hand and placed it on her chest. She said shyly, It hurts here. My heart hurts. Shen Luoan couldn't help but be intoxicated by her childlike innocence. At the same time, he felt that he was so despicable. She couldn't remember anything. She didn't know anything. He actually took the opportunity to get the answer he had been longing for a long time. He wanted her. She agreed. She said she loved him. She loved him very much. Although he knew that it was just a child's joke, he couldn't help but want to convince himself that it was true, he couldn't help but sink his body. Shen Luoan's hot kiss fell on her smooth and delicate skin. Oh. Shen Manting whispered, Honey, it's so ticklish. Shen Luoan didn't stop. He pulled down her pajama pants with his fingers and kissed her passionately and intensely, nibbling her inch by inch. Shen Manting couldn't help but wriggle. She hugged his head and bent her knees. When Shen Luoan took off the last of her clothes, the corners of his eyes were already wet. When she woke up one day, would she hate him? Or even hate him more than before? Shen Manting passively fiddled with his hands, and her hands climbed onto his. She endured his passionate kiss, and her body trembled slightly. She couldn't help but shout, Honey, honey, yes. Shen Luoan hugged her and lifted her legs. He lowered his body and said, I'm here. His voice was low and hoarse, and he couldn't hide his desire. Ah. Shen Manting's body tightened. She held him tightly and screamed, Honey. Shen Luoan leaned down and covered her mouth. The hot kiss was overwhelming. She was surrounded by an indescribable passion. Shen Manting had never felt this way before. She was filled with longing, and she felt an urgent need. Her breathing became heavier and heavier, and her lips and teeth were pressed against his. The wonderful and sweet feeling spread all over her body. Soon, she felt like she was being attacked. Shen Manting couldn't control herself and moaned in embarrassment. Shen Luoan was so strong that she was firmly confined in his arms. She couldn't help but clamp her legs around him. Hiss. Shen Luoan took a deep breath. Relax. Shen Manting was still tense and shouted, Hubby, hubby, yes, I'm here. Shen Luo gritted his teeth and whispered into her ear, Manting. Hubby, don't hate me. Shen Luo's voice was so low that it was barely audible. Shen Manting's chest tightened, and she felt a little sad. There was no light in the room, but she could clearly see that the corners of his eyes were a little wet. His heart ached. Shen Manting wrapped her arms around his neck, lifted her face, and kissed him gently. I love you, she said. Shen Luo looked up and kissed her neck even more fiercely. His hand supported her left and right, as if he was afraid of hurting her. His movements were restrained and gentle. Even so, Shen Manting was still a little out of breath. She panted and said intermittently, I love you, I won't hate you, ha. Chapter 2077. Shen Manting didn't quite understand, but she believed that she would remember what she had said. Shen Luo didn't wait for her to speak and gradually stuffed her words back into her mouth. Shen Manting couldn't say another word except for a low moan that she couldn't help herself. The next day. The baby woke up early in the morning. Daddy! 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 The little baby didn't cry. It seemed that he wouldn't stop until he was called. Shen Manting slept soundly and her body was strangely sore. However, his heart was very satisfied, when she opened her eyes. Shen Luo had already gotten up. He put on his clothes, picked up the baby, and walked into the bathroom. Shen Manting glanced at him and subconsciously wanted to get up, but the layers of soreness on her body made her feel uncomfortable. He moved a little, but his whole body felt very uncomfortable. She looked down and saw a hideous scar on her chest. She pressed it and felt a little painful. She felt a little wronged and lay down again. Shen Manting felt uncomfortable everywhere. You're awake? Shen Luo had already put on his pants when he walked back with the baby in his arms. Shen Manting saw him and remembered how she felt last night. She immediately blushed, covered her face with the blanket, and shrunk back. Shen Luo smiled. He let the baby wash up and walked out with the little guy in his arms. Outside, Mrs. Shen had already woken up. Shen Luo saw her and said, Mom, look after little Moon. I'm going to sleep for a while. Mrs. Shen looked at his bare-chested face and knew that there was something going on. Did he throw the baby out early in the morning and continue sleeping? Shen Luo wasn't someone who would laze around in bed. Humph. Mrs. Shen was a little happy. She took her grandson and waved her hand. Go, go, go. Shen Luo looked at the ambiguous smile on her face and felt a little embarrassed. But he didn't avoid it. He directly locked the child outside and then went in himself. Daddy? Little Moon had never encountered such a situation. He held the little toy in his hands and pouted. Grandma. Mrs. Shen bent down and picked up the little guy. Don't disturb Daddy and Mommy. Let's go. Grandma will take you shopping. Little Moon still looked unhappy. He glanced at the door of the room and followed Mrs. Shen out. Shen Manting curled up in bed and couldn't fall asleep. His body was very uncomfortable, but he felt very happy in his heart. The thick sweetness was like honey, thickly pasted in his heart. Shen Manting turned around when she heard the sound of the door being locked. She saw Shen Luo walking back. She shrank back and hugged herself completely under the blanket. Shen Luo chuckled when he saw this. He lifted the quilt and said, Are you hiding from me? Ah! Shen Manting screamed shyly and happily. Don't touch me. Yes, I won't touch you. Shen Luo pressed her down and said in a low voice, I want you. Shen Manting looked at him with bright eyes. When she heard this, she shrank back, but she was already ready to be slaughtered. When Shen Luo saw her like this, he couldn't help but recall that long-lost feeling. Last night, he had done it countless times. In the end, she had begged him not to do it anymore, so he had let her go. Now, Shen Luo leaned forward, pinned her down, and gave her a long, deep kiss. Chapter 2078. Her legs rubbed against him, and she was like a thunderbolt that ignited the fire in the ground. By the time it was over, Shen Manting was exhausted. He held her in his arms and took a bath before she fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up, there was no one beside her. Inexplicably, she was a little flustered. Shen Manting got up, looked around, and called out, "Hubby?" "Yes." Shen Luo's voice came from the cloakroom. Soon, she saw him dressed neatly. He was wearing a rare formal suit with a tie and a suit. He looked very handsome. Shen Manting's gaze fell on the tie that he had tied. Shen Luo followed her gaze and chuckled. "What's wrong? I didn't know a tie was tied like this." Shen Manting was a little frustrated and said, "I can tie it properly next time." Shen Luo laughed when he heard that. Soon, he walked forward with a few beautiful women's clothes on his arm. Shen Manting blinked and said, "Hubby, are you going to help me put on my clothes?" "Yes, get up quickly." Shen Luo responded and then put the clothes on the bed. Then, he pulled her up. Shen Manting's body was covered with his marks. It looked scary and ambiguous at the same time. Shen Manting shyly covered her body and said with a red face, "Hubby, what are you going to do when you're dressed so handsomely today? Get up and put on your clothes first, and then I'll tell you." Shen Manting was a little curious, but she still agreed. Facing his burning gaze, she felt even more ashamed. She reached out and pushed his face away, saying, "Don't look at me." Shen Luo chuckled but did not move away. He leaned over and kissed her deeply on the lips. "Don't be shy, I'll help you put on your clothes." "I don't want to." Shen Manting shook her head. "I'll do it myself." "Turn your head away." Seeing this, Shen Luo did not insist and said, "In that case, all right." Shen Luo turned his back and packed up the computer from last night. After Shen Manting was sure that he would not peek at her, she quickly put on her clothes. After putting on the dress that he brought over, she stood up and tidied it up. She said, "New clothes, hubby. Do they look good?" Shen Luo had already finished packing his things. When he heard this, he turned his head to look. It was early spring, and the weather outside was still very cold. Shen Manting was wearing a pink chiffon dress, which made her look elegant and fairy-like. Shen Luo's eyes were a little intoxicated. His gaze was gentle as he gently brushed her hair aside. "Beautiful, very beautiful." Shen Luo was telling the truth. But such blatant praise made Shen Manting feel even more embarrassed. Turning around, he picked up his coat and put it on. His coat was a beige coat that looked very clean and tidy. It looked rather dignified and elegant. "You're just too skinny." Shen Luo's heart ached for her. He looked at her and said, "You have to eat more meat." Shen Manting turned around and combed her hair. "I've been eating meat every day. Dad, Mom, Grandma, Jilia, and Qianqian all tell me to eat more meat. I've been eating, and I've become much fatter than before." "Indeed." Shen Manting looked much better than when she had just been discharged from the hospital. Her face finally looked a little rounder, but she was still thin. People couldn't help but feel sorry for her figure. However, after combing her hair, she suddenly remembered something. Chapter 2079. Shen Manting blushed and quickly ran into the bathroom. However, her body was already sore, and after running, she couldn't stand it anymore. The strange pain and soreness in her legs almost made Shen Manting lose her balance and fall. Shen Luo reached out to support her, and Shen Manting's face became even redder. She shook him off and walked to the bathroom with strange footsteps. After closing the door, Shen Manting looked in the mirror and found that her neck was full of densely packed marks. It looked a little spectacular, and Shen Manting was successfully frightened. She poked it with her hand and felt a tingling pain. She soaked a towel in hot water and applied it for a while. Her skin was scalded red, but it didn't reduce at all. After washing up, it was already half an hour later. When Shen Luo'an saw her coming out, he said, "Come here." Shen Manting saw him holding a silk scarf in his hand, and her cheeks were red. She walked over and let him help her put on the silk scarf. After going out, Shen Luo'an led her to Mrs. Shen. Mrs. Shen was a little surprised and exclaimed, "Manting, why are you so beautiful today? Are you going out?" "Yes," Shen Luo'an replied and said, "Mom, do Manting's makeup. Just light makeup will do." "Why? What are you going to do?" Mrs. Shen smiled ambiguously and said, "You're dressed up so well. Are you going to meet someone? Or are you going to get married?" Shen Luo'an seemed a little embarrassed and said, "Don't worry about me. You can do her makeup first." "Humph." Mrs. Shen didn't care and reached out to pull Shen Manting into her room. "Let's go. Manting's makeup skills were better than mine." Shen Manting walked in and saw a pile of brightly colored cosmetics on Mrs. Shen's dressing table. It looked vaguely familiar. After letting her do the foundation, Shen Manting was a little eager to try it out and said, "Mom, I'll try it myself." Mrs. Shen was all smiles. Sure enough, after a while, Shen Manting took matters into her own hands and put on her makeup. However, when she raised her hand, Mrs. Shen glanced at the deep and shallow marks on her neck. It looked quite hideous. When Shen Manting was rubbing her blush, she noticed her gaze and immediately felt a bang in her head. She quickly covered her neck with a silk handkerchief. Madame Shen was also an experienced person. She saw through him but didn't say anything. She said, "Your skills are still so good." "Sigh, I can't do it." Shen Manting was a little embarrassed. She lowered her head and didn't speak. Shen Luo'an's eyes were filled with amazement when he walked out. Looking at Shen Manting like this, it was as if he was looking at the high-spirited younger sister of the past. In the past, Shen Manting would go out in a glamorous manner every day. She was very capable and was promoted very quickly. He was always dressed in office lady attire, looking mature and steady. But now, the way she looked at him seemed to be a little timid and shy. Her pure and innocent eyes made him feel even more pity for her. "Hubby, I'm done." Shen Manting noticed that he was in a daze and reminded him, "Where are we going?" Shen Luo'an seemed to come back to his senses and said, "Yes, let's go." As he spoke, he reached out to hold Shen Manting's palm. Shen Manting's cheeks were red as she followed him into the car. Chapter 2080. It was the box for the ring. Shen Manting recognized it, and her eyes sparkled. When she opened it, it was the ring that she had secretly picked up and worn the last time. The ring was in the shape of a beautiful heart. The workmanship was very exquisite, and there was a big pink diamond in the middle. "Did you see it last time?" Shen Luo'an looked into her eyes. Indeed, there was no surprise in her eyes. Shen Manting nodded. "I saw it, but it was too big." Shen Luo'an smiled and picked up the ring. "Give me your left hand." Shen Manting extended her hand, and Shen Luo'an put the ring firmly on the ring finger of her left hand. It was a little wide, but it was much better than the last time. Shen Manting was a little surprised and said, "It's only been a few days. Have I gained so much weight?" "Yes." That was only one of the reasons. Moreover, he had also found someone to fix it. The first ring he made was based on Shen Manting's previous height and weight. If she wore it now, it would definitely be much bigger. Later, he secretly drew it twice while she was asleep and finally decided on the ring. When she gained a little more weight, she would be able to wear it very steadily. Shen Manting was a little happy. She looked at the ring on her hand and said, "It's so beautiful. I just told Xianxian yesterday that her ring was very beautiful, but now it's my ring that's even more beautiful." The shape of a heart was full of the heart of a young girl. Shen Luo knew that she would like it. He smiled and said, "Sit tight." He leaned over and fastened the seat belt for her. Shen Luo drove in the direction of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Shen Manting was guided the whole time. She signed and took pictures when she was asked to sign. After a series of procedures, when he came out, he received 2 small red booklets. The 3 large words embossed in gold clearly told them what they were there for that day. The warmth warmed Shen Manting's heart as well. "Let's go eat." "Yes." Shen Manting went forward to hold his arm with a red face and said softly, "Honey, I want to eat roast duck." "Okay." When Yi Qianqian and Shen Jielia arrived at Yuntown, Yi Zhenhua had just woken up. After Yi Qianqian brought her father out for dinner, she went to Fang Tongtong's house to sit for a while. Fang Tongtong's boyfriend was from Qing Town, and his name was Qian Zengsheng. Clear Town was about 2 hours away from Cloud Town. Yi Qianqian didn't know if she was mistaken, but she had a feeling that the man didn't like Fang Tongtong that much. Regardless of whether it was before Shen Jielia started dating or after they got married, his eyes were always shining when he looked at her. Very bright, very beautiful. Every time she saw him, Yi Qianqian felt that he loved her, and her heart was filled with happiness. However, it was obvious that when the man saw Fang Tongtong, his eyes did not sparkle much. However, it should also vary from person to person, thought Yi Qianqian. They chatted for a while, but before long, Shen Jielia came to take her home. Fang Tongtong walked her to the door. When she saw Shen Jielia, she looked at Yi Qianqian enviously and said, "Let's go for a walk tomorrow. I have so much to tell you." Chapter 2081. She smiled awkwardly and said, "Well, Tong Tong, let's talk on WeChat if there's anything you need to say. I'll head back first." Yi Qianqian knew exactly where the unhappiness in Shen Jielia's heart came from. "Okay. Goodbye." Fang Tongtong watched them leave and quickly turned back to go back in. Qian Zengsheng was smoking when he saw Fang Tongtong walk in and said, "Is this your best friend? He's quite good-looking and seems to be quite rich." "She's okay. She's good at her job. Her husband's family are all doctors." Fang Tongtong walked in and stretched. "Ah, I'm exhausted. If you're tired, let's go to bed." Qian Zengsheng walked forward and pulled Fang Tongtong in eagerly. "No." Fang Tongtong was a little resistant. "It's still early. Mom hasn't been feeling well recently. She has to go home and rest early." "It's okay. It's just a cough. It's not a big deal. It's okay." As he said that, he pulled her into the house. Fang Tongtong frowned and resisted, but she couldn't win against him. She was pulled into the house. The next day, they took her father for a checkup. When they found out that it was just a common flu, Yi Qianqian was finally relieved. Shen Jielia cooked for them that night. After accompanying the old man for dinner, the couple went to Kingstown on the 3rd day. They hadn't lived in their little nest in Kingstown for a long time. It was covered in a layer of dust. As soon as they entered the house, Yi Qianqian immediately backed out and said, "Lao Shen, let's go to a hotel." Shen Jielia replied, "Sure." After finding a hotel to settle down, Yi Qianqian couldn't wait to call Yu Lily. It was almost noon. Yi Qianqian had already informed Yu Lily the night before. When she called, Yu Lily and her family had already found a restaurant. She took a taxi and saw a young girl when she entered the private room. A pair of big, pitch-black eyes, like black grapes. Her skin was healthy, white, and tender, and she wore a long-sleeved white top with suspenders. Her soft hair was cut into a pot top, covering her small ears. At this moment, he was hugging a teddy bear and playing on a stool. When Yi Qianqian saw the child, her eyes lit up as if there were light bulbs in them. She cried out, "Xiao Xiao." Oh, Xiao Xiao heard someone calling her and turned to look. When she realized it was Yi Qianqian, her big eyes immediately turned into crescents. She called out, "Auntie Qianqian. Oh my God, you're so smart." Yi Qianqian stepped forward and picked Oh Xiao Xiao up. She pointed to Shenjilia and asked, "Who is this?" "Uncle." Oh Xiao Xiao's eyes rolled around happily as she shouted, "Mom, Auntie Qianqian is here." How could you Lily not know? She had long heard the commotion outside. He walked out with his arms crossed and snorted. "Yi Qianqian, how dare you try to abduct my daughter the moment you arrive?" "Aya, what are you talking about? Isn't your daughter my daughter?" Yi Qianqian was all smiles. She didn't have the slightest self-awareness that she had invaded someone else's daughter. "Where's your man?" "She'll be here in a bit," Yu Lily said. She leaned in to look at Yi Qianqian and said, "You don't look too well. You look like you've lost weight again." "Tsk, Shenjilia, how do you take care of your woman?" Chapter 2082. You're the pig. Yi Qianqian looked disgusted. She carried Oh Xiao Xiao over and said, "Hit him." Oh Xiao Xiao was very clever and said, "You can't hit people." "Wow, your daughter is so smart." Yi Qianqian couldn't help but sigh. "My brother's child is a month older than your child, and he can't even speak coherently." "It's normal for girls to grow faster than boys," Yu Lily said, but her face was still proud. "Come on, sit down and order. By the way, are you free tomorrow?" "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian sat down with Oh Xiao Xiao in her arms. "Is there something going on?" "Well, I want to take Xiao Xiao to the amusement park tomorrow. It'll be more fun with the two of us." Yu Lily handed over the menu, then looked behind them and said, "Why are you only here now?" "There was something at the company, so I took care of it." Oh Ming was wearing a burgundy suit. His face looked thinner and more masculine than 2 years ago. Without any explanation, he carried his daughter away and asked, "Did you miss Daddy?" "Yes." Oh Xiao Xiao's crisp voice was young and cute. Oh Ming was satisfied. He turned his face away and said, "Give me a kiss." Oh Xiao Xiao kissed him on the cheek, and Oh Ming immediately took out a small toy from his pocket. It was a bouncy ball that changed color when it was shaken. "Wow!" Oh Xiao Xiao was surprised. Her big eyes were shining, and she shouted, "Thank you, Daddy." Oh Ming's face was full of happiness. He sat down next to Yu Lily with his daughter in his arms. When he saw Yi Qianqian, he seemed a little surprised. "Hey, have you two been working hard again recently? Look at the circles under your eyes." Tsk, Yi Qianqian touched her face and felt that something was wrong. She took out a small mirror from her bag and looked at it. "Is my complexion really that bad?" Yu Lily looked at it and said with a straight face, "Actually, it's okay. It's a little better than when you used to stay up late and work overtime for more than a week." Yi Qianqian was speechless. She glared at Shenjilia and raised her leg to kick him. "It's all your fault." Shenjilia felt extremely wronged and shouted, I haven't done anything to you at home these past few days." Only the heavens knew that she had been sleeping like a dead pig for the past 2 days. What could he possibly do? How could he be blamed for this? "You're too noisy. You're affecting my beauty sleep." Yi Qianqian stepped on him again. "You have to compensate me for my youth and beauty." Okay, Shenjilia said with a helpless look on his face. "There are still children around. Don't lead them astray." Oh Ming looked at them and said meaningfully, children don't understand. If you want to do something, I won't stop you. Yi Qianqian was speechless. Shunjilia was speechless. After dinner, Yi Qianqian and Yu Lily took the children shopping, while O Ming went back to work. Shunjilia pitifully returned to the hotel alone. He picked up his phone and looked for Luo Ran out of boredom. Shunjilia, Luo Ran, Shunjilia, Luo Ran. Is there something wrong with his brain? Shunjilia, vomiting blood, my wife ran away with another woman. I'm so sad now. Luo Ran, that's great. It just so happens that I have something I need your help with. Shunjilia. I'm going to sleep. Chapter 2083. Shunjilia, Luo Zhan. Luo Ran, well, he has been developing a software recently, and it seems that he has some disputes with his partners. I feel that he is a little negative. Anyway, you have nothing to do. Go talk to him. Shunjilia, since he had nothing to do, Shunjilia soon arrived at Luo Zhan's company. Luo Zhan was very famous in Kingstown and even in the whole of Wuxia. He was the famous #1 hacker, and Shunjilia had asked him for help several times in the past 2 years. When he arrived, Luo Zhan was busy. There was a bowl of instant noodles in front of him, and he looked very busy. Unlike Luo Ran, who paid great attention to his appearance every day, at this moment, Luo Zhan looked a little slovenly. There was a slight stubble on his chin, and his hair was very short. He looked a little thin. His skin was whiter than Luo Ran's, and he looked like he hadn't slept for several days. He looked like a classic IT nerd. Shunjilia saw his face, which looked exactly like Luo Ran's, and felt a little emotional. Hello, long time no see. Luo Zhan was surprised. Why are you here? Your brother asked me to see you. Shunjilia didn't stand on ceremony and sat down. Are you free? Well, not really, Luo Zhan was very honest. I've been crazy busy recently. I'll be free when this project is sold. Why did my brother ask you to come? I came to see you and see your recent mood. Shunjilia looked at his red eyes. Haven't you slept recently? There are so many things to do every day. How can I have time to sleep? Luo Zhan smiled. Well, you sit here for a while. I'll write the code first. I'll forget it later. Okay. Shunjilia sat on the sofa, but his eyes did not forget to look around. There were several magazines in front of him, one of which had a very young man on the cover. He was dressed in a suit and leather shoes. He looked handsome, had a high nose, and had a strong temperament. On it was written, the new star of the IT industry. After Z, another new legend, Louis Han. After looking through it, there were original software, Qianlu, Cancer, and Bai Qing. These software were all particularly famous. The first one was Louis Han's early famous software, a mobile music arrangement software. As for Tumor, it was a virus removal software. In recent years, it had become very popular. Biqing, on the other hand, was an even more optimized and portable software based on the foundation of Cancer. It was highly praised. Shunjilia suddenly recalled that when he had passed by an office desk earlier, he had seen an optimization proposal for absolute purity. So, the person who Luo Zhan recently cooperated with was actually Louis Han? Luo Ran had said that he had a dispute with his partner. Could it be that he had a dispute with this person? All right. Luo Zhan walked over with a bottle of water in his hand and handed it to Shunjilia. Why did you come to Kingstown? I brought my wife here to play. Shunjilia didn't stand on ceremony. He uncorked the bottle and took a sip. Have you been busy with Biqing recently? Luo Zhan was startled, and then said, yes, I've been doing this optimization recently. Oh. I heard that you have a good relationship with Louis Han. Is he in a hurry? Why are you in such a hurry to get rid of it? Luo Zhan looked at him and said, What did my brother ask you to do? What did he say to you? Chapter 2084. No need. Luo Zhan put it down and smiled bitterly. It's just that there are too many things to do recently, and I feel a little depressed. When I'm done, I'll feel better. I see, Shenjilia nodded and quickly changed the topic. But they could talk about anything. Even when talking about work, Luo Zhan was relaxed and humorous. However, when it came to Luihan, Luo Zhan was always a little vigilant. It was like he didn't want to mention it. But Shenjilia didn't notice that he hated Luihan at all. It was a point that made people wonder. After chatting for a while, Luo Zhan continued to work. Shenjilia also got up and left, but when he went back, he told Luo Ran the general situation. Luo Ran was silent for a moment and said, I suspect that he cheated. Shenjilia said. You are his brother. It is because he is his brother that I am suspicious. I know him too well. He has never had a serious girlfriend for so many years. Last time, he had a girlfriend, but he dumped her. In the future, whenever Luihan asks him to do something, he will spare no effort to help. How can a brother be like this? According to what you said, should I also suspect that you have come out of the closet? Bah! Luo Ran spat. I am straight, a man of steel. Recently, I was about to be killed by a woman, and you still suspect that I have come out of the closet? Shenjilia laughed mercilessly. I'm not kidding. I think my brother is likely to fall into Luihan's trap. This guy is very cunning. I don't think so. If he really planned to come out of the closet, he wouldn't be in a hurry to get rid of the project. Since he did this, he must want to get rid of Luihan. Don't worry. Luo Ran said. I hope so. When he returned to the hotel, Yi Qianqian was already back. She was lying in bed playing with her mobile phone. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Yi Qianqian looked up and smiled. Old Shen. Yes? Today, I went shopping with Lily and passed by a fortune-telling stall, so I went to have my fortune read. Again? Shenjilia frowned. Why do you always go to fortune-telling? The more you read, the worse your fortune will be. Yi Qianqian felt a little disappointed. I was just curious. I'm already 28 years old this year. According to what they said, I should be able to get pregnant this year. So, I went to do a reading. How so? The fortune teller said that I could get pregnant this year. Yi Qianqian held his hand excitedly. Recently, I've seen a lot of children. I'm so envious. Lily Xiao is so cute. Her nose and eyes are so similar to her parents. She's so beautiful. Humph! Shenjilia took off his jacket and shoes and pounced on her. Our children will be like us in the future. Don't be envious of others. We'll have our own children. When Yi Qianqian saw that, she knew what he was up to. She kicked him and said, Go take a bath first. I don't want to wash. I smell good. Bah, go away. I won't do it without bathing. No. If you don't give it to me, I'll use force. How dare you? Yo, you're quite arrogant. Let's see if I dare or not. Oh, he was completely defenseless. Chapter 2085. Yi Qianqian couldn't wake up the next day because of her terrible indulgence the day before. Shenjilia had wanted to let her sleep a little longer. In the end, she slept from 9 o'clock p.m. until 7 o'clock p.m. She didn't wake up even once. Unable to bear it any longer, he shook her awake and shouted, Wake up! Wake up! You still have to take the child to play with Mingli. Oh, I'll sleep a little longer. Yi Qianqian covered her head with the blanket. 10 minutes. Shunjilia was speechless. 10 minutes later. When he returned, Yi Qianqian still showed no signs of waking up. Honey, get up. Shunjilia had no choice but to pull her up. How can you sleep so much? Get up. Well. Yi Qianqian frowned and looked reluctant. I'm not feeling well. I want to sleep. Where do you feel uncomfortable? Sleepy, Shunjilia had no choice but to say, get up first. You can come back to sleep when you're done. It wasn't easy for you to come to Kingstown. Don't you want to hang out with Xiao? Yi Qianqian groggily tried to get up and replied, yes. Then get up. Yi Qianqian got up with her eyes closed and fell into Shunjilia's arms. Old Shun, help me get dressed. Shunjilia felt defeated. He rummaged through the new clothes she had bought the day before. It was a white long-sleeved spring dress. The long shirt and trousers were quite thick. Yi Qianqian allowed him to do whatever he wanted. When she was done changing, she finally opened her eyes and went to brush her teeth and wash her face. By the time she met up with O Ming and Yu Lily, it was already past 8 o'clock. By the time they finished breakfast, it was already past 9 o'clock. Yi Qianqian was overjoyed. She smiled and asked, what should you call me? Auntie Qianqian. The crisp voice was accompanied by a smile. I want to eat buns. All right, Auntie will feed you. Yi Qianqian smiled happily and picked up a soup dumpling for her. Be careful, it's hot. Oh Xiao slowly leaned over and took a bite. As if it was a little hot in the mouth, its little head shrunk back a little. However, it happily leaned forward and took a bite. Is it delicious? Oh Xiao nodded and smiled happily. A pair of big eyes, lying silkworms under the eyes, was very obvious. Her lips were red, and her face was fair and tender. Today, she was wearing a beautiful white dress. Those who didn't know better would think that they were mother and daughter. Ah, she's so cute. Yi Qianqian's heart was about to melt. Old Shun, we want to have a daughter in the future too. Sure. Shunjilia was inexplicably happy. He looked at the little guy and said, we're going to have 3. That won't do. We have to pamper our daughter like she's a little princess. We have to have 2 sons to protect our daughter. Yi Qianqian fantasized about it. Her heart was filled with joy. That would be perfect. Isn't that what happened to Li Xicheng's family? O Ming said. In Li Xicheng's family, they adopted a boy and gave birth to another boy. D*mn, for already? Yi Qianqian's eyes widened. That's so noisy. Yu Lily was a little envious. Their children are all so sensible. I don't know how to raise them. Hey, hurry up and eat. Once you're done, hurry up and go in. Yi Qianqian took O Xiao everywhere and unknowingly got lost. She called Shunjilia and told him where to find her. Yi Qianqian led O Xiao to sit down at the side. Chapter 2086. In the evening, she grabbed Yi Qianqian's hand and shouted, Auntie Qianqian, I want to eat this. O Xiao was pointing at a big brown bear with a cotton candy stall. Her movements looked a little clumsy, but she looked very cute and attracted the attention of children. All right, Auntie will buy it for you. She reached for her purse and waited for Bear to finish making the cotton candy. But when he looked down, he saw O Xiao standing with a child who looked about 5 years old. The child was not well dressed. He wore a mask on his face and looked at O Xiao. Yi Qianqian walked over and took a look. She didn't seem to mind. She held Xiao's little hand and guided her. Call him little brother. O Xiao was also very polite. She shouted, Hello, little brother. The child glanced at Yi Qianqian and quickly ran away. Yi Qianqian found it a little strange. Why aren't there any adults watching? It was too dangerous for such a small child to run around. But soon, the cotton candy was ready. She reached out to take the cotton candy and handed it to Xiaofan. Here, take it. Thank you, Auntie. Xiaofan was very happy, holding it in her hand with a smile on her face. Yi Qianqian caressed her little face and chuckled. You're welcome. Let's go back and look for Daddy and Mommy. Yeah. Xiaofan licked the cotton candy and held Yi Qianqian's hand. Suddenly, he felt someone approaching him from behind. Yi Qianqian subconsciously turned around. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s. His attire was similar to that of the child from earlier. They were all dirty, but the difference was that this person was striding toward Yi Qianqian aggressively. Yi Qianqian was about to speak when the man suddenly raised his hand and slapped her. Yi Qianqian's face tilted to the side. King B *tch, he scolded in a thunderous voice. You lied to me and said that you were going to work, but in the end, you kept King Gigolo and stole my daughter. You're so shameless. Yi Qianqian was confused. She looked up at him and asked, Who are you? Who am I? The man looked fierce and sneered, I am the father of the child. As he spoke, he was about to grab the frightened Xiaofan next to him. Human traffickers. That was the only word that popped up in Yi Qianqian's mind. She quickly shielded the child and shouted angrily, Who the *ck are you? Scram! I don't know you. You don't recognize me? The man was furious. He went forward to drag her over and shouted, You've kidnapped my daughter. Why are you pretending to be an upper-class B *tch here? B *tch, stinky whore. As he spoke, he raised his leg and kicked Yi Qianqian hard. Mom, Mom. Yi Qianqian heard a child crying. She looked up and saw that it was the child who had been staring at Xiaofan. The child was wearing a mask and stood in front of Yi Qianqian to protect her. It was unclear whether he had intentionally or unintentionally wiped his palm across Yi Qianqian's face. When Yi Qianqian caught a whiff of the pungent odor, she felt her nose flush and her head spin. She could clearly hear the child in front of her shouting, Daddy, don't hit my mommy, I beg you, you're still calling her mom. She doesn't even want you anymore. She took away my family's property, kept a gigolo, and kidnapped my daughter. See if I don't beat you to death, you bitch. Chapter 2087. Yi Qianqian stood up with Xiaofan in her arms, but before she could steady herself, she was kicked hard. She felt a sharp pain in her head. Caught off guard, she fell heavily to the ground. However, he still protected Xiaofan in his arms. Looking around, more and more people were crowding around. Yi Qianqian struggled to get up. She grabbed a man's trousers and shouted, Help me! Help me! I don't know him, Daddy. Xiaofan seemed to see Ming. She suddenly shouted and looked ahead, Daddy, Daddy. The man came forward in exasperation and pulled her hand away without saying a word. Then, Yi Qianqian felt the emptiness in her arms. Xiaofan's cries could be heard. She stretched out her hands in one direction and shouted, Daddy, Daddy. Yi Qianqian's body was weak, and her brain was heavy. Looking in that direction, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. It was as if a hand was tugging at her womb, causing her limbs to spasm due to the intense sensation of falling, accompanied by a sharp pain. Damn it, why did Aunt Flo come at this time? Yi Qianqian cursed her bad luck. She endured the pain in her stomach and struggled to get up. She chased after the man. She stretched out her hands, trying to catch him. Yi Qianqian grabbed the man's clothes with both hands, but he kicked her away. UB asterisk TCH. F asterisk CK off. The kick was so heavy that it sent Yi Qianqian sprawling on the ground. There was a sharp pain in her waist. A white light flashed in her head, and she cried out in pain. Qianqian? A familiar voice called out. It was O Ming. Daddy! Oh Xiao cried loudly and waved her hands at O Ming. O Ming was shocked and roared, "Let go of my daughter." Seeing O Ming, Yi Qianqian was relieved, but soon, the pain in her lower abdomen became more and more obvious. As the heat flowed down, Yi Qianqian's consciousness began to blur. Yu Lily was walking behind him. When she saw O Ming's reaction, she immediately ran up. However, he saw Yi Qianqian lying on the ground in the crowd. Yi Qianqian was wearing a white suit that day. At that moment, her lower body was dyed a shocking red. Yu Lily's face turned pale. Her voice trembled as she ran forward. Qianqian. When she saw Yu Lily, she wanted to get up, but she didn't even have the strength to move her fingers. Tears rolled down Yu Lily's cheeks. She looked at Yi Yu and panicked. You have to hold on. You have to hold on. Then, he turned around and shouted, Shenjilia. Shenjilia. However, no one responded. Yu Lily's hands trembled as she said, Qianqian, don't be afraid. You'll be fine. I'll take you to the hospital right away. As he spoke, he flipped through his phone with trembling hands and dialed 120. Yi Qianqian looked at her and suddenly felt a little amused. She pretended to be light-hearted and said, I'm fine. I'm just a little dizzy. Also, did you bring any sanitary napkins? I might be on my period. When Yu Lily heard this, she broke down and burst into tears. Don't talk. Shut up. Soon, the ambulance was connected, and Yu Lily quickly reported the address. Shenjilia searched for a long time. He couldn't find the cotton candy bear stall that Yi Qianqian had mentioned. Finally, after asking for directions several times, he finally found this small path. From afar, Shenjilia saw a large group of people gathered together. It looks like she had a miscarriage. It's so pitiful. Chapter 2088. I knew that the little girl was so cute. It was impossible for her to have a father like that. When I saw her real father, I was amazed. He was so handsome. Don't be so infatuated. The people inside are going crazy. It's so tragic. Shenjilia felt terrible when he heard that. Miscarriage? What a pity, the couple had been struggling for 2 years, but there was no result. Others came to an amusement park, and an unborn child was lost just like that. While he was feeling sorry, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. Qianqian, hold on. It was Yu Lily's voice. Shenjilia's heart skipped a beat, and he turned to look at the crowd. Lily? Shenjilia's voice was very loud. Soon, Yu Lily's voice came from inside, Shenjilia. Shenjilia was basically sure that she was inside, so he immediately pushed through the crowd and walked in. Excuse me, please excuse me. Finally squeezing in, Shenjilia saw a cotton candy stall at a glance. However, at the same time, he also saw the person who was surrounded in the middle. Yu Lily's face was full of tears. Holding Yi Qianqian in her arms, she broke down and cried, Qianqian, boom. Something seemed to collapse in his mind. It was like being hit hard on the top of his head by lightning. All the blood in his body suddenly flowed backward and rushed to the top of his head. In an instant, Shenjilia seemed to feel that his whole body was cold. His actions were already one step faster than his brain. When he came back to his senses, he was already by her side. At that moment, Yi Qianqian's snow-white suit had become dirty. And the lower part of her body was shocking red. The smell of blood reached the tip of his nose, with the smell of rust. Shenjilia's heart was shocked, and suddenly, he seemed to lose his mind. With trembling hands, he wanted to hold her, but he did not dare to act rashly. How could this be? Shenjilia looked at Yi Qianqian in front of him, and his eyes unconsciously reddened. He looked at Yu Lily and asked, how could this be? Yi Qianqian had already fainted, but when she heard Shenjilia's voice, she frowned. But she did not wake up. Honey, Shenjilia couldn't believe what he saw. He took Yu Lily's hand and said, let's go to the hospital. Don't move, I've already called an ambulance. Where's the ambulance? Shenjilia was on the verge of breaking down. He roared with bloodshot eyes, where's the ambulance? Why isn't it here yet? Yi Qianqian's eyelids were very heavy. In her daze, she could clearly feel that something was rapidly slipping away. However, he couldn't see it clearly, touch it, or grab it. Old Shen, Qianqian, don't let anything happen to you. Don't move. We'll be at the hospital soon. Shenjilia's voice was trembling. Yi Qianqian wanted to reach out and grab him. Very quickly, she was firmly held in his hand. She could feel him kissing her hand. It was warm and wet. Yi Qianqian suddenly felt a little sad. The sharp pain in her lower abdomen had paralyzed her nerves. Vaguely, she seemed to have guessed something. Lifting his eyelids with difficulty, he saw nothing but darkness in front of him. 2 rays of dim light pierced the bottom of his eyes. In front of her, Shenjilia's face was stained with blood. It was a blur, and it was difficult to see clearly. Yi Qianqian opened her mouth, and tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. She asked weakly, am I pregnant? Chapter 2089. It's okay. It's okay. Shenjilia held her hand. His voice was choked with emotion. However, he quickly restrained his emotions. It'll be fine. You sleep for a while, I'll wake you up later. Yi Qianqian could clearly sense that something was wrong with Shenjilia. Her heart ached terribly, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. He closed his eyes and felt dizzy. However, his senses were so clear. She could feel that she was bleeding. It was fiercer and more ferocious than ever before. The feeling of falling became heavier, and the pain was enough to make one despair. Shenjilia was not usually like this. He wouldn't do that. Why does he look so unsteady? It shouldn't be like this. The pain in her lower abdomen hit her hard. She couldn't help but cry out, no. Shenjilia had finally managed to calm himself down, but when he heard her crying, he almost broke down again. Don't cry. Don't cry. It's all right. Shenjilia wiped away her tears, but his voice was muffled and trembling slightly. He took a deep breath and kissed her hand. In a hoarse voice, he whispered, I'll be fine when we get to the hospital. It'll be fine. It'll be fine, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but burst into tears. She held on to Shenjilia's hand tightly. I didn't know. I didn't know he was here. I didn't know I had a child. I'm so sorry, it's not your fault. Don't cry, Shenjilia pleaded. We'll have more. This time, we weren't prepared. He came too suddenly. Next time, we'll definitely protect him well. Be a good girl. Go to sleep first, okay? Shenjilia looked at Shenjilia. However, Yi Qianqian could not calm down at all. In a weak and sorrowful voice, she said, I'm sorry, don't say sorry, Qianqian. At that moment, Shenjilia's voice became extremely clear. His voice trembled slightly, but he was very rational. He said, now, I don't want a child. I want you. Nothing can happen to you. I beg you. Sleep first, okay? His words made Yi Qianqian feel even more pain and discomfort. No one knew better than her how much Shenjilia loved children. It wasn't easy to get this child. If only he had been discovered earlier. If only he had been discovered earlier, he might have survived and become the first baby in their arms. I'm sorry, Yi Qianqian's voice was sobbing, but her consciousness gradually faded. When she woke up again, she could clearly hear the heartbeat. The smell of medicine rushed to the tip of her nose. She moved. And opened her eyes. The light in the room was dazzling. Yi Qianqian frowned and narrowed her eyes. You're awake? Shenjilia asked. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Yi Qianqian was a little dazed when she heard his voice. Waves of pain came from her stomach, stinging every nerve in her body. Jilia, Shen's heart as if it was, and he felt, Yi. Shen. He. As he. Holding her hand, he averted his reddened eyes and said, I'll call the doctor. Chapter 2090. Shenjilia didn't make a sound. He bent down and kissed her gently on the forehead. Then, he took her hand away. He whispered, wait a minute. I'll ask the doctor to examine you. Soon, Shenjilia went out. When Yi Qianqian saw his reaction, she knew the answer. She seemed to have lost all her strength. Lying on the bed, Yi Qianqian's vision suddenly blurred. When the doctor came in, Yi Qianqian was looking at the ceiling with tears streaming down her face. After checking everything was fine, Yi Qianqian was already sobbing. Shenjilia didn't make a sound. He sat quietly beside her and held her hand tightly in his. I'm sorry, Yi Qianqian said with a strong nasal voice. I'm sorry, old Shen. I'm sorry. Shenjilia stood up, leaned over, and kissed her deeply. Gently and tenderly. Shenjilia quickly let go and looked at her condescendingly. Yi Qianqian's tears were like a raging spring, flowing down uncontrollably. At that moment, her eyes were already red and swollen as she looked at him. We were not prepared. Shenjilia looked at her. No one expected him to come at this time. It's not your fault. It's me. If I had been by your side at that time, this would never have happened. I'm the one who should say sorry. Honey, I'm sorry. Yi Qianqian's tears flowed even more fiercely. She immediately raised her hands and hugged him, letting herself cry even more. Shenjilia's eyes were filled with warmth. He gently patted her shoulder and didn't make a sound. Qianqian. A soft female voice came quietly. Shenjilia looked sideways and saw Yu Lily. Yu Lily walked in with a little girl in her hand, followed by O Ming. Behind O Ming, there were two big men. Each of them carried one person and were quickly thrown to the ground. Yi Qianqian looked sideways. Wasn't it the man who pretended to be her husband and wanted to abduct the child and beat her until she had a miscarriage? The man had a swollen nose and a swollen face, and his hands and feet didn't look nimble. After being thrown by the big man, he was immediately trampled on the ground like a useless dog. The other one was the child who cooperated with the man. However, the mask on the child's face was gone. It was a mature man's face, but it was now bruised. Let me go. I didn't know she was pregnant. If I had known, I wouldn't have dared to hit her even if I had 100 guts. The man who was thrown down immediately cried and kowtowed. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. This time, I was just possessed. Ah. Before he could finish speaking, O Ming kicked him hard on the neck, and he fell to the ground. O Ming's expression was fierce, and he didn't hold back his strength as he stomped on the ground. You don't dare. I'm afraid I won't dare to do it if I die. That person was trampled on the ground, and his face was already green and red. Enough. Hand us over to the police if you have the guts. We can sue you for abusing justice. The kid said. His voice was that of a mature man. Ming loosened his foot and kicked him hard in the chest. The man, who was as thin as a child, was kicked to the ground, his face full of pain. Apologize, Ming growled. You dare to hit anyone? Are you tired of living? His face was fierce, and his voice was fierce. As soon as he finished speaking, the big man who had just beaten them to the point where they couldn't get up took 2 more steps forward. He was full of deterrence. Chapter 2091. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. The 2 men got up and kowtowed in Yi Qianqian's direction. We won't do it again. Please forgive us. The 2 men looked like they were on the verge of collapsing. It seemed that they had been beaten up badly. Yu Lily held her daughter's head, not letting her see or hear. Her eyes were red and swollen. Looking at Yi Qianqian, who was still indifferent on the bed, her heart ached. Send them to the police station, Shenjilie said indifferently. Ming, how long can you let them be sentenced? When Ming heard that, he knew what he meant. Don't worry. They won't be out for at least 20 or 30 years. Ming looked at them coldly. Take them away. Yes. The 2 bodyguards each took one of them away. The 2 men shouted unwillingly, B*****. What right do you have to do this? You think you're so great just because you're rich? Let us go. Yi Qianqian closed her eyes and turned her head away. Qianqian, I'm sorry. Yu Lily's voice was choked. If I had taken care of the child myself, it would have been better. But I gave the child to you. I'm sorry. I hurt you. You can scold or hit me. I'm sorry, Qianqian, Lily, Shenjilie said. It's my fault. Don't blame yourself. If I had followed them closely, nothing would have happened. If I hadn't asked you to go out to play, nothing would have happened. Yu Lily held her daughter and guided her. I'm sorry to Auntie Qianqian. Auntie Qianqian, I'm sorry. Xiao pouted and looked aggrieved. If I didn't eat. Tang, it would have been fine. The little girl's face was tense, and she almost cried. Her eyes were red. She looked up at her mother and said, Mom, call me godmother. Ming walked forward and picked Xiao up. If it weren't for Qianqian today, you would have been taken away by the bad guys today. You might have been killed and never seen your parents again. Auntie Qianqian is your second parent. From now on, call Auntie Qianqian godmother. Godmother. Xiao pouted and called out. Yi Qianqian couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She turned her head and saw that they all had solemn expressions on their faces. You don't have to do this. Yi Qianqian looked at them. It's me. If I hadn't brought her around, we wouldn't have met those 2 people, and we wouldn't have gotten lost. Nothing would have happened to us. His voice was very low, so low that it was barely discernible. When he heard Yi Qianqian's words, he held her hand. There's no such thing, Ming said. There's no such thing as knowing everything in advance. You saved Xiao, so you're her savior. If you don't want to be her godmother, that's fine. Qianqian, we're truly grateful to you. It was the first time Ming had spoken to Yi Qianqian in such a serious manner. The moment he opened his mouth, he said it in such a manner. Yi Qianqian felt a little emotional. Looking sideways, Ming had already walked over with his daughter in his arms. Call her godmother. Godmother. Yi Qianqian suddenly chuckled, and tears rolled down her cheeks. With a smile on her face, she teased, in that case, I've earned a daughter. She propped herself up and tried to sit up. Shenjilia quickly went forward to help her up. Oh, Xiao went forward and wiped her face with her tiny hands. She said, "Godmother, don't cry." Chapter 2092. Oh, Xiao didn't quite understand. She looked up at her parents. Yu Lily's eyes were red, but there was a smile on her face. Oh, Xiao didn't understand, so she turned back. Oh, Xiao didn't quite understand, so she turned around. Oh, Xiao didn't understand, so she turned back. That was good. Yi Qianqian's release was the best ending. The child came suddenly. Although it was a pity, no one expected it. Shenjilia suddenly remembered what his grandmother had said a few years ago, there will be a disaster at 28. Maybe it was the disaster they were talking about. It was a good thing to face it. It was better than always worrying about when it would suddenly come. Shenjilia looked away. Suddenly, his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that it was from his grandmother. Shenjilia didn't avoid it. He picked it up and said, "Grandma." Jilia, old Mrs. Shen's voice sounded a little sad. Did something happen to Qianqian today? Shenjilia was stunned and looked at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian looked back. She seemed to have guessed something. "Yeah," Shenjilia replied. "How did you know?" Old Mrs. Shen sighed. "Fate." Shenjilia was silent when he heard that. Yi Qianqian looked at him and asked, "What did Grandma say?" Shenjilia didn't answer. He said to the old woman on the phone, "Yeah." "So, what happened to Qianqian?" Old Mrs. Shen asked. "I'm getting more and more useless. It was Dongfang who told me that something happened to Qianqian." Sigh, something happened. I'll tell you later. Go to bed early. Goodbye, Grandma. Jilia. Old Mrs. Shen wanted to say something. But before she could say it, Shenjilia hung up the phone. Yi Qianqian looked at him and asked, "Does Grandma know?" "I don't know." Shenjilia looked at her. "I know that something happened to you, but I don't know what it is." Yi Qianqian lowered her head and answered, "Yeah." "Are you hungry? What do you want to eat?" "I'll buy it." Oh Ming looked at them. "You're my daughter's godmother. I can't treat you badly." Yi Qianqian smiled and said, "Thank you, but I have no appetite now." "Let's go back first," Yu Lily said. "Qianqian needs to rest. Let's not disturb her here." "Yeah," Oh Ming said. "That's true. Qianqian isn't in a good state. Let's go back first and visit her tomorrow." "All right. In that case, Old Shen, we'll be leaving first." Oh Ming came forward and carried his daughter over. "If you need anything, remember to call us." "All right." Finally, he left. Yi Qianqian was exhausted. Shenjilia walked over and gently pulled her into his arms. "Sleep for a while," he said. "Yeah." Yi Qianqian closed her eyes and fell asleep with his help. However, she quickly closed her eyes and said, "Hubby." "Yes." "What if?" Yi Qianqian's voice trembled, and her tears fell. "What if I can't get pregnant in the future? Don't let your imagination run wild," Shenjilia said with a frown. "You're the only one with a rich imagination. How can you live a good life?" Yi Qianqian sniffled, wiped her face, and turned her head away. Shenjilia sighed softly, but then he received another call from his family. It was Shen Luo. When he picked up the phone, he heard the sound of the wind. Shenjilia frowned and said, "Hello." Shen Luo was driving and hadn't reached home yet. At that moment, he was in a great mood and taking Shen Manting for a ride. I'll update chapter 31 first and continue during the day. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to sleep. If you're done, you can go read the new book, 99 Days of Hidden Marriage, Prima Donna, please be reserved. Seeking monthly votes. Chapter 2093. Shenjilia's voice was clearly a little low. It sounded like he was in a very low mood. When Shenluo heard her voice, he swallowed the good news that was on the tip of his tongue and asked, "What's wrong with you? Grandma told you? What's wrong?" Shenluo felt that something was amiss. "What did Grandma tell me?" "I'm outside with Manting. We haven't returned home yet." Shenjilia was in a very low mood. When he heard this, he simply replied, "Yeah." "Not in a good mood? Did you quarrel with your wife?" Only Yi Qianqian could make the usually happy-go-lucky Shenjilia so depressed. Shenluo had a premonition that he had already guessed correctly. He comforted her and said, "It's common for a married couple to quarrel. Be nice and apologize to Qianqian. There's nothing wrong with that." Shenjilia said nothing. Shenluo was even more certain of that. To avoid making him even more unhappy, he changed the topic and said, "I came out with Manting today. We went to the Civil Affairs Bureau." He glanced at Shen Manting and said, "We're married." Shen Manting couldn't help but be influenced by Shenluo's cheerful expression. Looking at the two little red books in his hands, he was in a very good mood. When Shenjilia heard this, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. He forced a smile and said, "I've finally succeeded. Is Sister Manting by your side?" "Yes." Shenluo was in a great mood. "I'll take her out for a ride." "Yes, congratulations. Are you preparing for the wedding?" As Shenjilia spoke, he sensed Yi Qianqian's gaze on him from the bed. Yi Qianqian seemed to have guessed what was going on and asked, "Are you married?" Shenjilia nodded his head and replied, "Yeah. I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau today." "Yeah, it's pretty good. Congratulate Big Brother on my behalf." Yi Qianqian's voice was very soft, and her throat was a little hoarse. "Finally, the clouds have parted to reveal the moon. Get some sleep." Shenjilia gently stroked the hair on the side of her face. "I'll go get some dinner." "I haven't had dinner yet." "What's wrong?" Shenluo finally sensed that something was wrong. "Did you two quarrel? What happened to Qianqian?" Shenjilia's heart ached when he heard this. He tucked Yi Qianqian in and said softly, "I'm going out to make a call. Wait for me to come back." "Yeah." Yi Qianqian closed her eyes. Shenjilia turned off the lights and closed the door behind him. He gave the nurse some instructions before walking out of the hospital. Shenluo had been waiting all this while. He had a bad feeling about this. "Something happened to us." "What is it?" "She met a human trafficker who drugged her. She was beaten up and found out she was pregnant." Shenluo was shocked and couldn't help but tense up. "That child, I couldn't." Shenjilia's voice was low. It was so deep that it was almost hopeless, and it made people feel sad. Shenluo fell silent. The joy on Yi Yi's face disappeared. Shen Manting noticed that he had suddenly become serious and couldn't help but ask, "Honey, what's wrong?" Shenluo shook his head and asked Shenjilia, "Have you caught the culprit?" "Yes, Oh Ming is handling it. However, the lost child could never come back." Shenjilia's heart sank. He reversed the car into his own yard before turning off the engine and stopping. "Do Mom and Dad know?" "I haven't told them yet." Shenjilia sighed heavily. "Grandma just called me. She's old, and I'm afraid she'll be sad. Can you help me find an excuse?" You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.